Hey guys, tonight we lace up the quietest boots you own, tilt a battered paper lantern against a moonless sky, and start walking toward a rumor that keeps getting taller every time someone repeats it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a note in the comments with your city and the time on your bedside clock. I want to see how far this midnight relay can stretch. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You plant your first careful step on a goat trail the color of ash. It slithers up the hillside as if it has someplace secret to be, and you have to follow its snaking logic in the dark. Fresh night dew kneads the dust into a tacky paste, so your soles peel away with little sighs. One hip holds the lantern out front, a trembling halo the size of a dinner plate, always threatening to abandon you when the wind exhales. Somewhere higher on the ridge, a hammer drops in a slow, deliberate beat. Thunk, 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 and your heartbeat politely matches the tempo, as if the two of you have rehearsed. The unfinished Great Wall looms ahead like a half-wakened dragon stretched across the spine of northern China. No textbook illustration ever warned you how the thing steals stars. Look up, and a neat rectangle of the Milky Way simply goes missing behind the silhouette of bricks stacked in mid-construction. Scaffolding poles jut out like uneven whiskers. A few resin torches cling to them, winking like tired fireflies chained in place. You notice quickly, this wall is not the yellowed tamped earth version from earlier kingdoms. These are kiln-fired gray bricks arranged with the persnickety precision of an imperial abacus. And the glue that locks them in is the hero of our story. Sticky rice mortar. Yeah, dinner and concrete had a baby. A pair of laborers puff past you, each balancing a yoke with jingling iron hooks. The buckets on either side steam aggressively, and one of them shouts over his shoulder, "Mind your step. This porridge bites back." You grin, because the smell sneaking out of those buckets is so home kitchen sweet you half expect someone's grandmother to appear with bowls. Instead, a foreman nearby claps rhythm on his bamboo clipboard and yells for the night crew to keep the lime furnaces fed. Kiln smoke staggers across the path, flavored with something toasty, almost caramel. That's rice starch mingling with burnt firewood. Here's your first mainstream history pit stop. Starting around the reign of the Ming Emperor Hongzhi, mid-1490s, the Northern Defense Plan went brick crazy. Kilns mushroomed along riverbanks, pumping out standardized blocks 8 inches by 8 by 4, each weighing just enough to build muscle but not shatter a porter's spine. Lime mortar was classic for stone, but the Ming military engineers wanted an adhesive that shrugged off monsoon rains and sub-zero winters. Enter chefs with helmets. They cooked short-grain glutinous rice to a gluey oblivion, mixed it with slaked lime, and created a composite that modern X-rays show can resist water penetration better than some 20th century cements. You grind upward, fingers brushing a temporary railing cut from pine logs. Sap oozes in cold beads, making your grip sound like Velcro. A gust throws open your collar and whips a smoky fragrance across your face. The kilns are still roaring because bricks need to be delivered piping hot to mate happily with the warm mortar. The soldiers say it prevents shock cracks. You're not entirely convinced, but the chemistry checks out. When lime cools too fast, it sulks and splits. Rice porridge, still near boiling, persuades the lime particles to set in leisure, making the union denser. Cold wind analytics aside, quirky fact time. Besides rice, overenthusiastic cooks sometimes slipped in ground sap from an edible cactus known locally as Kirin palm. Legend says a Fujianese quartermaster stumbled on the idea after dumping his travel rations into the wrong bucket. The cactus gum gave the mixture an elastic chew, reducing microcracks during freeze-thaw cycles. One contemporary account swears that if you tugged a fresh ribbon of mortar, it would stretch like candy until it snapped with a sound identical to breaking sesame brittle. Please don't bite the wall, we're keeping dentistry bills low tonight. Past the third switchback, the slope steepens. You start leaning forward, almost kissing your knees each step. Breath fogs the space before your eyes, a private cloud that instantly shreds on the next breeze. Somewhere farther along, a drummer announces shift change. Not an alarm, just a polite baton pass. But each boom echoes down the valley so slowly you could butter toast between beats. Your lantern reveals a file of porters emerging from the black like sketches coming to life. Each wood bucket drips moisture onto the dirt. Not water, hot rice mortar. They must move fast. If tonight's cargo cools into brick-sized rice cakes, tomorrow becomes a scraping marathon. The man nearest you parks his yoke and prizes off the lid. Steam barrels out, whiteness on steroids, wrapping your head in temporary amnesia. When it clears, the brick wall stands close enough for you to lay a palm against it. The surface is warm, borderline bathwater warm, thanks to fresh mortar radiating its final pastry size. You press harder. The bricks feel almost soft under the trembling film of starch before the proteins decide to lock down. That tactile surprise delivers an itch of understanding. This colossal defense line is, quite literally, a banquet that decided to petrify. Grain rerouted from stomachs to parapets, calories becoming calcium bonds, dinner turning to deterrent. Logistics numbers stumble through your thoughts. Just one commandery, the historical Jijin, documented more than 30,000 dan of glutinous rice funneled into construction over a decade. That's enough porridge bowls to keep 3 average counties humming through an entire lunar calendar. Economists of the time moaned about walls eating grain faster than soldiers. Yet the state kept signing off and the supplies kept pouring in. Why? Because every collapsed fort segment cost more in raids, ransom, and political embarrassment than 100 wagon loads of rice. You overhear a clerk mutter to himself, "Tax the granaries, not the treasury." He scribbles figures under a dim oil lamp, while a hot bucket of the empire's savings stews behind him. Your lantern flickers. Maybe the wick feels intimidated by the wall's quiet glow. Mortar joints reflect the flame like thin, ivory ribbons tucked between gray bricks. You test one with a fingernail. Judging by the sudden heat and surprising firmness, your fingernail loses the duel. A modern experiment. You once skim-soaked 2 identical brick samples, one with rice mortar, one with plain lime, in a tank for 40 days. The rice-fortified piece came up grinning, almost unchanged. The plain sample, edges frayed like stale tofu. Why exactly does amylopectin, the hulking starch molecule inside glutinous rice, bond so fiercely with carbonate crystals? Historians and chemists are still debating that in conference halls where coffee runs out faster than answers. One camp says the starch physically fills micropores, the other claims chemical synergy with calcite surfaces. Insert dramatic PowerPoint transition sound here. Wind whistles across a half-finished crenellation. You look up from your amateur science fair just in time to dodge a mason swinging a bucket of slaked lime the way a bartender might show off with a cocktail shaker. He salutes your stumbling two-step and jokes that rookies are worth their salt if they leave with both eyebrows intact. The statement is not completely metaphorical. The mortar recipe performs best with brackish water drawn from coastward salt ponds. The sodium tweaks the pH, nudging carbonation reactions along. Salt water instead of fresh water. Unexpected ingredient, but apparently the empire's coastline pays rent in chemistry tips. Let's let a little politics seep in, gently though. We're nearly at the top and oxygen is a premium. While masons chant rhythms to steady bricklaying hands, statesmen hundreds of li away argue over budget tables. A memorial scroll delivered this very week warns. To feed mortar is to starve the frontier garrisons. An opposing scholar counters that without a wall that laughs at siege ladders, those same garrisons become a buffet for invaders. The emperor will nod, stroke his beard, and, if court rumors hold true, approve yet another quota of sticky rice. The debate tastes endless, like chewing sugarcane fiber long after the sweetness leaves. Your climb flattens into an almost level catwalk. In the lantern glow you see the wall stretching both directions until it fades into cloud. Up close, each brick's edges are so crisp you could slice parchment on them. A benefit of tight firing schedules and standardized molds. You reach out, slide 2 fingers into a mortar seam still glistening. It's only a fingertip deep, yet the texture is shockingly fine, like cooled custard dusted with chalk. You imagine a spoonful in a porcelain bowl, sprinkled with sesame, served to a very confused dessert connoisseur. You suppress laughter that would bounce off the night and betray your presence. Take a moment to listen. Mountain silence returns in the gaps between hammer falls. It's a layered quiet, thick with cedar resin, candle smoke, and the faint palpitation of thousands of bricks cooling in real time. On some fold of air, distant crickets start and stop like faulty maracas. In this hush you discover the wall is never, not even in deepest night, entirely still. The mortar cures. Lime crystals bloom microscopic needles, linking grain proteins in a mineral handshake. That chemical conversation will continue for months, even years, gradually tightening its grip long after the last brick has been set. A lanky conscript waves you over to the edge. He points down the cliff at a labor camp dotted with blue fires. "That's tomorrow's batch," he says. "Rice is soaking right now. Takes the edge off the starch granules. You know?" You nod solemnly, pretending total comprehension. Another soldier chimes in. "We joke the wall might taste better than army rations, but good luck finding teeth hard enough to test the theory." You decide not to mention the fingernail experiment earlier. Quirky tangent number 2. Aged rice, the kind forgotten in storage too long, actually works best. High amylose varieties get sticky after prolonged soaking, which, according to a late Ming agricultural tract, offers mortar a tenacious character equal to a righteous official. So yes, the government basically legislated leftovers into military hardware. Waste not, fortify. Above your head the night finally concedes a faint eggshell glow. Pre-dawn. You realize you've spent hours shadow dancing with stone giants, yet time felt syrup slow. Another crew replaces the first. The handoff looks like a choreographed ritual. Buckets pass, trowels trade hands, and a foreman taps each new worker's shoulder, murmuring a blessing that mixes folk superstition with supply chain protocol. You walk among them almost invisible, part tourist, part temporary ghost. Around you, bricks keep stacking, mortar keeps seeping, and the wall inched another brick taller while no one was looking. Step back, figuratively. Let your mental camera pan wide. Somewhere far behind these dark ridges, the Grand Canal ferries rice northward. Somewhere farther, Jiangnan patties glisten under moonshine, each stalk heavy with potential glue. The empire's economic body flexes so its armored spine, the wall, can stand a little straighter. You, an accidental witness, are linked to farmers bending knees in muck and scholars bending quills over cost estimates. The common denominator, rice grains. Eat them, pay them, paste them between bricks. The grains obey whichever destiny the dynasty assigns. You exhale. The warm vapor rises, meets the cooler mortar vapors, and merges like an embrace between human impermanence and architectural stubbornness. The moment leaves a spice of humility on your tongue. If the wall endures for centuries, it will be partly because someone somewhere kept stirring a pot of porridge at 3 in the morning while cursing the wind. A small act with colossal consequences. Clouds part briefly, and the North Star flicks a wink at you through the highest crenel. That sight triggers a sleepy philosophical itch. Is the mortar holding the wall, or is the wall holding the stories of every cook, porter, and mason who ever touched it? Scholars might answer with spreadsheets. Poets will toss back metaphors like confetti. Historians still debate, and probably always will, whether technological innovation or sheer political willpower mattered more in these stones. You are content, for now, to stand atop both arguments, lantern tilted against dawn. The sky turns the color of watered milk. Somewhere down slope, roosters you never met pick a fight with the horizon. Your shoulders sag, pleasantly weighted by fatigue instead of worry. The job of describing this sticky rice marvel has only just begun, but the wall itself is already telling half the story through steam, stone, and the faint sugary crust along its joints. You rub thumb and index together, discovering they're lightly glazed. Evidence, but tastier than carbon dating. There will be other nights, other chapters, deeper dives into the formulas, the bandit plots to steal them, the scholars who tried to patent starch before patents were a thing. For now, you linger on the wall's crest, feeling sunrise nudge everything brighter. Bricks cool into morning firmness. Mortar stops steaming and starts whispering, settling into the long silence of almost forever. You pocket a stray grain of rice that somehow escaped the bucket. Souvenir of a night where supper turned to superglue. The new sun stretches over the ridgeline like a cat waking from a long nap, but you're already padding along the top course, fingers itching to test something solid after a night of steam and theory. Bricks, ordinary, rectangular, handled a billion times across centuries, suddenly feel as exotic as meteorites. They lie in tidy rows, still exhaling the ghost of kiln fires that raged miles away. A glint catches your eye. Thin mineral sweat seeps through one joint, sparkling before it evaporates. It reminds you of sugar on a carnival funnel cake, only this recipe is strictly no-eat. You crouch, pick a brick that's yet to cool entirely, and cup both palms around it the way a child cradles a flushed cheek. Heat and humidity pulse through the clay shell, coaxing the lines on your fingertips into a quick confession. Every ridge, every whirl, recorded for an instant on the brick's matte skin. Guards lounging nearby notice your fascination. One calls out, "Careful, scholar. Those stones stick like gossip. Hold them too long and you'll be part of the wall by lunchtime." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs, half serious, half teasing. Around here, humor doubles as health warning. The guard steps closer, taps his knuckle against the brick face, and delivers your mainstream fact of the hour. Ming-era bricks for strategic ramparts had to survive a drop from shoulder height without cracking. Regulations spelled it out, official handbooks for military construction. Revised in the Wanli Reign, list 13 inspection criteria, including a ringing tone on strike. Brickmakers would test by tapping with an iron rod. A clear, bell-like ping meant success. A dull thud meant back to the kiln. Quality control, 16th century edition. You test the ping yourself. The note lingers, faint but musical, before merging with mountain wind. The sound travels through your wrists so cleanly you understand why supply officers wrote poems about brick tone. One stanza even compared a flawless brick to a jade chime, but with fewer imperial taxes attached. Whoever penned that lived dangerously. While you still hold the block, the guard shares a quirk you won't find in textbooks. Sometimes masons scrawl jokes or tiny prayers in wet clay before firing. Dig out enough bricks and you'll find smiley faces older than calculus, or one-line operatic parodies scorched into permanence. A popular gag shows up repeatedly. "May this brick be the laziest soldier, standing guard forever without moving." The guard swears he once flipped a brick over and read, in cramped characters, "If you're reading this, congratulations, you have too much free time." You vow to keep an eye out. Lowering the brick, you study the slight sheen on its surface. The red-brown of earlier dynasties has given way to a sober slate gray, thanks to improved firing temperatures and iron content. Tactile inspection yields variants no thicker than a fingernail, evidence of molded uniformity the bureaucrats adored. Identical bricks stack faster, need less mortar, and, according to military accountants, reduce casualties caused by sloppy seams. You catch yourself smirking. In effect, one of the world's costliest defenses is also a triumph of paperwork. Wind lifts goosebumps across your forearms, cooling the brick in your hands until comfort returns. A mason waves you toward a low parapet where fresh deliveries shine like loaves from an oversized bakery. Cradled in straw, these bricks still vaporize dew on contact. He invites you to sniff, not for aromas but for information. A faint earth smoke drumbeat tells experienced builders whether a brick cooked long enough. Underbaked units trap moisture that later freezes and bursts them from within. Overbaked bricks turn brittle, splintering under siege engines. Finding the sweet spot in a wood-fired kiln, with temperatures swinging by the whims of wind and fuel moisture, requires experience equal parts science and witchcraft. Around you, sun-warmed mortar joints begin to dry into ivory lines. A porter passes, bucket empty, muttering about day shift rations. You remember the numbers from last night. Tens of thousands of dan of rice translated into mortar, into walls, into these bricks now humming quietly in your hands. A traveling monk once commented that the wall feeds on rice like a dragon on pearls. He meant it as admiration and critique in equal measure. You suspect both readings still hold. Mainstream detail number 2 enters with a swagger. Most Ming bricks carry incised marks naming kiln origin, production date, and sometimes foreman initials. The empire expected accountability all the way from clay pit to battlement. Archaeologists today treat those stampings like DNA, mapping supply lines across entire provinces. At this very moment your thumb follows a faint set of characters. Yongping, 5th month, Zhang de 4. Translation. Built in 1509 by a kiln near modern-day Tongshan. You just shook hands with 16th-century logistics. Yet nothing tonight is allowed to pass without scholarly scuffle. Debate topic. Were these markings strictly utilitarian? Or did they also serve as proto-branding, advertising a kiln's reliability? Some historians call the idea anachronistic. Others point to anecdotal ledgers praising certain brick sources for miraculous endurance, implying a reputation economy. The argument rages in journal footnotes long past anyone's bedtime, and will probably still rage when another millennium of mortar has cured. You shift the brick onto its narrow end, balancing it on the parapet edge. A quirk of thermal expansion causes a faint click as it settles. The guard flinches. Hear that? Good omen, he murmurs. Apparently, bricks that click instead of clunk as they cool are blessed by the stove god. Nobody agrees why, but every mason you meet knows the superstition. One foreman claims the click proves microscopic fractures sealing shut. Another says it's a reminder from ancestors to leave room for air. Scholars could measure acoustic spectra all day, yet the masons trust folk acoustics over lab results. And yes, academic circles still argue whether superstitions improved safety via accidental quality checks or merely spread like entertaining mold. An officer strides up, polished cuirass reflecting sun darts. He asks why you're fondling state property. Before you stammer a reply, he surprises you. Hold 2 bricks, 1 in each hand. Tell me which was fired in a dragon kiln and which in a horse kiln. His expression is poker flat, but the gleam in his eye says this is a favorite party trick. Dragon kills carve into hillsides, using slope to draw flames like breath through a flute, achieving higher temps and thus denser bricks. Horse kills are horizontal, cheaper, producing lighter stock. You heft both specimens. The left brick is slightly heavier, edges crisper. The right shows pinholes from faster venting. You answer, left is dragon, right is horse. He nods satisfied and, believe it or not, lets you keep one as a souvenir. It's the lighter one, of course. The heavier stays on the wall. Now you're the proud caretaker of a Ming-era brick. Try explaining that at airport security. The officer exits with a parting comment. Remember, every brick you touch once burned thrice. First in fire, second in lime, third in rumor. Cryptic, but he walks off before you can pry deeper. Curiosity tugs you groundward. Descending a narrow ladder, you step onto packed earth where a kiln crew prepares the next batch. They soak clay in shallow trenches, stomping barefoot in unison like dancers in a rural festival. The rhythmic squelch borders on therapeutic. A master kneads the mix with a wooden rake, ensuring water evenly permeates. He invites you to try. Your toes sink into the cool clay. Instant childhood nostalgia, minus the scoldings. Tiny pebbles tickle your soles, and you understand why craftspeople in mosaics of eras considered footwork training part of apprenticeship. A young boy balancing a gourd dipper recites a rhyme. Clay too lean, wall will wean. Clay too fat, bricks will chat. Lean means low plasticity. Fat means too wet, both ruin form. The rhyme's been around since at least the Song dynasty. Schoolchildren today might chant it unaware they're quoting medieval QA manuals. You notice straw bundles stacked nearby. They're not for animal bedding. Once shredded, they reinforce clay in the green brick stage, minimizing warp during drying. A clever trick imported from pottery practices. Another odd additive waits in wicker baskets. Salt crystals the size of peas. When mixed into clay, they encourage vitrification, raising surface hardness. Yet scholars squabble whether salt truly helps or simply records coastal kiln habits. Some claim the practice backfired, causing efflorescence that later disfigures brick faces. Evidence exists on both sides, fueling symposium debates so niche you could host them in a broom closet. A whistle shrills. Workers load bricks onto sledges bound for a nearby dragon kiln. You hitch a ride, perched on the sled's tail. The track slopes gently down, gravity doing half the labor while men and women jog alongside. steering with wooden poles. At the kiln mouth, heat waves ripple the air until edges blur. Inside, a firebox roars like a mythic beast, tongues bright enough to dye your vision pink even with eyes narrowed. Bricks stack in arches, leaving flues for flame to dance through. Each row called a boat. Each boat inspected by a master whose fingertips are so calloused they look like cork. He taps, flips, adjusts spacing by fractions of an inch. Kiln art rivals painting in precision. You retreat before eyebrows singe, but not before snagging a tidbit. Occasionally potters slip tiny rice cakes between bricks as sacrificial humidity sponges. When the fire peaks, those cakes carbonize, leaving microscopic voids that vent steam, an accidental technique for crack prevention. Archaeologists have found charred rice residues fused in brick pores, proving at least some batches followed that ritual. Is it purposeful engineering or superstitious insurance? Surprise, the jury is still out. Outside, a clerk records brick counts on bamboo slats. He explains rations. For every 1,000 bricks delivered intact, each worker receives 2 liang of pork, a ladle of wine, and, believe it, the right to sit during supper. Efficiency and ergonomics, Ming style. Pork giveaways aside, his ledger reveals that kiln output fluctuates with weather. Humid spells force longer drying, having daily totals. That volatility pressured planners to build buffer stockpiles. One particularly rainy year, supervisors conscripted local theater troupes to help carry bricks. True story, footnotes confirm. The actors complained that stage swords cased fewer blisters than real bricks. Costumes doubled as sunshades, though, so not all was lost. The guard from earlier appears again, hands buried in sleeves. He confesses that masons sometimes season bricks with brine left over from pickling vegetables. The salt allegedly tightens outer layers against erosion. He's not sure it works, but he likes the smell of pickles when the sun hits freshly salted bricks. You picture a fortification scented faintly of sour cucumbers. Defense a la Delhi. Scholars hesitate to endorse the method. Lab tests yield mixed data, yet anecdotal walls near pickle-loving regions appear oddly well-preserved. Another unresolved file added to the cabinet. By mid-morning, brick piles resemble squat ziggurats casting short shadows. The cool stone path you walked last night radiates warmth now, and you realize why so many segments doubled as thoroughfares. Couriers could gallop horses atop the wall faster than slogging valley roads. The bricks beneath their hooves needed resilience, hence the emphasis on high-grade material. You imagine a courier at full tilt, saddle leather squealing, while the sticky rice mortar flexes microscopically, absorbing impact. The empire engineered not just a fence, but an expressway, centuries before asphalt dreamt of existing. A supervisor signals lunch, steamed millet, and, of course, rice. You smile at the irony. Eat part of the wall, build part of the wall. Workers line up with palm-sized bowls, chatting about rumored bandits who steal buckets of mortar to sell as mystical glue capable of mending porcelain without a trace. One woman rolls her eyes. If they can carry it off without their arms turning into noodles, let them. Her sarcasm earns chuckles and a reminder that myth and black market often share a bedroom. You set your souvenir brick down to eat, propping it as a makeshift seat. The heat now reduced to a cozy radiator, it warms muscles stiff from climb and kiln proximity. Biting into a dumpling, you ponder that every calorie you swallow could have been on mortar duty if the requisition officer took a wrong turn. In imperial memos, rice isn't described as food. It's described as material in flexible form, convertible to man-hours or structural glue depending on political taste. That perspective twists your understanding of dinner. Meal finished, you stand, brush straw from trousers, and pick up the brick again. This temperature matches the day, neutral, obliging. You run a thumb across one edge and feel tiny serrations left by a wire used to cut wet clay. Those tool marks, hidden once mortared in place, are fingerprints of artisans who never saw the final wall. They measure time in firings, not in years. A sudden desire to mark your own presence rises. You scratch a small star onto the brick's underside with a pebble, a harmless signature before it rejoins its brothers. History decides whether it cares. Afternoon wind hums through scaffold gaps, carrying the smell of pine tar and distant river mud. Mason chatter drifts on the breeze. Someone claims certain batches fire better under a waxing moon. Another scoffs, citing an official decree banning lunar scheduling as astral nonsense impeding productivity. The ban exists, but compliance? Questionable. Scholars still wrangle over whether lunar cycles subtly influence kiln temperatures via gravitational humidity shifts, a hypothesis simultaneously mocked and investigated. You suspect the truth is less cosmic and more coffee break storytelling, but the tale refuses to die. A runner arrives with sealed orders. An unexpected mortar shortage up north means bricks here will ship out tomorrow instead of next week. The crew groans. Accelerated schedules mean night shifts. You volunteer to help lug straw covers, earning surprised nods. Sweat soon paints a glossy film across your skin, binding clay dust until you resemble a terracotta figurine still under sculptor review. Somewhere inside the physical strain, you glimpse the smallest slice of what full-time laborers shoulder daily. The brick in your hand gains spiritual weight measured in blisters. Evening flares gold on kiln roofs, and a foreman calls everyone to witness a final rite, choosing one first brick for the next day's wall segment. Superstition again, but ceremonious. Candidates line up, each brick examined, weighed, tapped. After several rejections, your souvenir brick enters contention. You hesitate but surrender it when the guard gestures permission. Foreman taps it, listens, smiles. A thumbs up seals the deal. Your brick will form the cornerstone at dawn, a tiny anchor for thousands more. Pride sneaks up on you, mixing with bittersweet loss. You wonder if travelers centuries from now will rest against that brick and feel a shadow of your gratitude. Dusk tiptoes in. Workers settle around makeshift fire pits, bowls of rice gruel cradled like warm secrets. You sip yours, tasting the foundation of both bodies and fortresses. Behind the camp, kills crackle, their orange throats visible through peepholes. Sparks rise in lazy spirals, merging with stars freshly baked into the firmament. A mason leans over, whispering that each spark represents a brick soul finding its place among constellations. You contemplate filing that under romantic nonsense, but another part of you nods sagely. After all, scholars still argue whether mythology or engineering best explains why the wall endures. Perhaps it needs both. The guard, your accidental tour guide, lifts his bowl in a silent toast. You reciprocate. Bricks clink as loaders stack tomorrow's supply. Somewhere, sealed inside cooling dragon kills, more clay evolves into architecture, waiting for morning hands. You stretch aching shoulders, aware that fatigue here isn't an intruder. It's the membership fee for touching history in its raw, furnace-fresh stage. Night completes its return. Lanterns blossom along scaffold rails in familiar amber halos. You blow across gruel, finish the last mouthful, and feel rice starch coat your tongue. Foundation flavor. The first brick you met is now cooling a few yards away. Chosen, blessed, maybe humming still under layers of straw. Tomorrow, it'll receive a kiss of sticky rice mortar, and the wall will grow another tooth. You rise, brush dust from knees, and step toward a bunkhouse where snoring already competes with kiln crackle. One glance back shows bricks stacked like disciplined dreamers, ready to line up the moment dawn sighs awake. You sense their patient confidence, mass multiplied by intention. You whisper a goodnight promise to visit again, then push open the wooden door and let firelight fall behind. You come awake to a smell that refuses to decide whether it's breakfast or building material. The bunkhouse rafters creak as you swing your legs over the side. A neighbor snores on, face buried in straw, but your nose plays alarm clock. Outside, dawn is already rummaging through tool racks, painting everything the color of warm brass. You follow your nostrils downhill toward a canvas pavilion so patched it resembles a veteran quilt. Steam curls from its eaves in lazy ribbons. Half kitchen, half dragon's nostril. Inside, chaos organizes itself by aroma. On the left, cooks in soot-kissed aprons wrestle cauldrons big enough to baptize a horse. Each pot simmers an ocean of glutinous rice, bubbles popping like polite applause. On the right, lime workers in identical soot but totally different swagger shovel white powder into barrel stoves, the dust snowing sideways whenever someone sneezes. A single plank walkway separates cuisine from chemistry. You feel as though one ill-timed stumble could season dinner with caustic lime or, worse, deluxeize the mortar with scallions. A bald cook notices you gaping and waves a ladle like a scepter. "Hungry or handy?" he asks. You admit to both, so he thrusts the ladle into your grip. Its handle bears teeth marks, evidence of previous volunteers using jaws when wrists gave out. You plunge the spoon into the thick porridge. It moves reluctantly, like waking a hibernating bear. Steam soaks your eyebrows, infusing them with rice perfume. "Keep that clockwise," the cook instructs. Counterclockwise invites blisters. You obey, stirring in broad, slow arcs. Across the plank, a lime stoker mimics your motion with a steel rake, folding powdered rock into boiling water. The parallel choreography feels rehearsed, as if stirring is a sacred call and response between stomachs and stonework. Mainstream historical nugget. Ming garrisons rarely kept separate kitchen and workshop fires. Fuel was precious. Consolidating hearths conserved wood and sped logistics. According to a 1532 Defense Gazetteer, some frontier forts allotted exactly 3 furnaces, one for meals, one for mortar, one standby for every 100 soldiers. Anything hotter or larger risked visible smoke plumes that could guide bandit scouts. Kitchens therefore doubled as chemical labs, and cooks acted as de facto junior engineers. You're living that footnote, ladle in hand. The cook elbows you knowingly. "Bet you didn't realize lunch nails walls together, eh?" His grin reveals a missing incisor. He snatches a fistful of fine hemp fibers from a basket and sprinkles them into the pot. You start to protest, imagining chewy textiles in porridge, but he shakes his head. "Not for eating. These strands go in the batch for parapet caps." Adds tensile strength. He'll later skim them off into another tub before serving the crew. Quirky fact unlocked. Certain forts experimented with fiber-reinforced rice mortar centuries before modern concrete got the memo. Fragments of hemp have turned up in core samples, baffling geologists who thought fort cooks were sloppy. You glance over as the lime man scoops a mug of pale slurry, lets it dribble back like melted ice cream. He catches your eye and yells, "Protein test," before flicking a bead onto a polished shovel head. Sits there quivering, refusing to slide. "Perfect viscosity," he declares. Then he steals a ladle of rice porridge from your cauldron, mixes it into his bucket, and offers a conspiratorial wink. Evidently, resource sharing here is a fluid concept. A table near the tent center hosts a bizarre still life. Baskets of onions, coils of rope, stacked bricks cooling under burlap, and a sleepy chicken inexplicably perched on a bag of lime. The chicken blinks, unconcerned about living on the fault line between breakfast and masonry. Someone cracks an egg into a side kettle. Protein allows the mortar mix to foam slightly, making it lighter atop krenels. You suspect the chicken might file a grievance if it understood chemistry. The cook relieves you at the pot, spinning the ladle so fast it whistles. He nods to a low bench where bowls wait. You dunk one. Scoop porridge from an edge the lime hasn't infiltrated. Sticky, translucent grains string between bowl and cauldron in glossy threads. You blow gently and sip, sweetness soft as lullaby whispers across your palate. Eating mortar mash never tasted so comforting. Around you, workers fill identical bowls, some adding a dash of soy sauce, others pinch rock salt collected from yesterday's kiln runoff. Yes, waste not, flavor more. A carpenter shuffles in, palms blackened, requesting a scoop of the hot porridge. He wants it for his wrist, strained last night hoisting beams. Cook obliges, adding ginger slivers. Apparently, builders discovered warm rice paste doubled as a decent poultice. Modern sports medicine has yet to issue a rebuttal, but the carpenter's sigh suggests field approval. You notice a row of small clay jars at the rear, each labeled with brushstrokes. Matured 7 days. Matured 1 month. Winter reserve. The cook explains. Aging rice paste deepens flavor for humans and increases bonding strength for mortar. The latest lab tests from 21st century civil engineers. Yes, you once watched that documentary. Confirm aged starch retrogradation can enhance adhesion by up to 8%. Historians still debate whether Ming cooks understood the science or just followed taste buds and empirical luck. Personally, you lean toward taste buds. Rarely do spreadsheets smell this inviting. A sudden clang interrupts your musing. Outside, a bell signals today's first brick placement. The cook nods to you. Ceremony time. Bring the cauldron. You nearly laugh, imagining serving soup to a wall, but he's dead serious. Together, you and two others slide iron hooks under the cauldron's rim and heft it onto a yoke. Your vertebrae protest, but the weight steadies after the first lurch. Hot slurry sloshes like a trapped lake, each sway threatening to baptize your boots. Procession out the tent resembles a bizarre festival parade. You four in front with breakfast adhesive, behind you a drummer providing tempo, and trailing, a line of masons carrying the pre-selected cornerstone. Your brick from last night, cradled in straw like a royal infant. Spectators gather. Guards, cooks, even the chicken, now riding a baker's shoulder for better view. At the wall edge, a foreman chants a few lines honoring the earth god and the stove god in one breath. Dual patronage seems apartment. You lower the cauldron onto a tripod. The drummer falls quiet. Everyone steps back except the mortar master, who lifts a bamboo scoop, dips into your rice porridge, then drizzles a silky ribbon across the stone bed where the new brick will sit. Sunlight strikes the paste. It glitters milky gold before soaking into the lime. The foreman sets your brick atop the paste, presses gently, and twists, a motion identical to sealing a jar lid. The crowd exhales. Someone near you mutters, "It's eating." The metaphor lands. The wall digests rice the way you digest breakfast. Nourishment, growth, defense, same input, different outcomes. Mainstream digression, timed perfectly. Court records from 1592 mention an edict limiting fort kitchens to short-grain rice only, because long grain produced mortar too brittle. The policy caused a brief market bubble. Merchants hoarded short grain, prices skyrocketed, and for 3 months soldiers ate millet until the emperor's auditors stomped on speculation. Economic historians still reference this as an early example of commodity control impacting strategic infrastructure. Ceremony finished, workers resume routine. You and the cook return the half-empty cauldron inside. He plops a smaller pot beneath the first, catching drips. That runoff will be dessert, sweetened later with jujube paste. Dual use remains a theme. A gangly teenage apprentice beckons you toward a side stall marked by charcoal sketches of human bones. "For science," he says, offering a ladle of mortar tinted pale pink. Alarmed, you ask about the color. He laughs. Ground pig's blood. An experiment to resist fungus. The idea surfaced last month after someone butchered hogs too close to a mix station. Accidental contamination led to mortar joints that, rumor claims, shrug off moss. The apprentice confides the recipe is unofficial. It'll stay that way unless bureaucrats sniff out the piglet physics. You dip a finger. The texture feels disturbingly silky. Scholars hundreds of years later will argue whether such bioadditives mattered or were just frontier folklore. Debate fuel prepackaged. Across the walkway, a lime stoker shouts, "Boils up!" Flames licking his barrel shift from orange to silver. A sign the lime is fully slaked. He shovels heaps of snow-white slurry into open troughs, where another team folds in rice porridge from your cauldron's twin. The mixture burps, releases a hiss like a startled cat, then settles into gleaming sludge. Someone scribbles measurements on a wooden slate, ratios of lime to rice to water, always adjusting for humidity. Efficiency here isn't guesswork. It's iterative cuisine. Suddenly, the chicken flaps onto the trough edge, pecks curiously at the goo, then hops away, leaving 3 claw marks. A mason claps in delight. Lucky talons means quick curing, superstition or quality control. Either way, nobody wipes off the marks. You suspect the bird has unwittingly become co-architect. Lunch approaches. The cook invites you to taste a sauce he's developing. Fermented soybean and a dash of lime water. The combination tangs sharply, but surprisingly pleasant. He grins. Acid and base in harmony, like army and kitchen. You attempt to respond, but a swallow of the sauce steals your words. Eyes water, sinuses clear, heartbeat applauds. He's convinced adding a bit of this solution to fresh rice mortar stops insect infestation. Results inconclusive, but it definitely stops conversation for 5 seconds. Score 1 for pest control. Midday sun draws sweat from every forehead. You help ladle mortar into wooden buckets, each marked in charcoal with destination codes. One bucket receives a flourish of painted lotus petals, signal for parapet ornamentation where tourists, centuries later, will snap selfies. You imagine telling them their perfect backdrop once bubbled in a cauldron beside onions. A senior mason corners you, brow furrowed. He explains a running challenge. Keep mortar workable long enough for distant crews without it spoiling. Rice starch ferments quickly in summer. Some forts experimented with adding alcohol brewed on site. Rice wine acts as mild antiseptic, extending shelf life by hours. Of course, once workers discovered the leftover slurry still carried a buzz, control became difficult. The empire soon issued a decree forbidding unfiltered consumption of structural mediums. Naturally, compliance ran inverse to how boring the shift was. Scholars still debate how much of the wall's budget vanished into merrymaking disguised as quality testing. The cook yells for taste test volunteers. You line up again, wooden spoon in hand. This batch is breakfast for the second shift. Lighter consistency, more water, less starch, because afternoon heat thickens anything left standing. You sip. Flavors bloom simple yet deep. Your tongue, now attuned to mortar metrics, notes the slightly looser gel. Perfect for noon hydration, but maybe too thin for joints in the shade. You mention this. The cook nods, scribbles a note. He'll thicken the next kettle with a fist of roasted barley flour. Barley improves flavor, but no one knows if it improves bond strength. Guess what? Laboratories centuries later will test shards and argue both ways. The circle of scholarly scuffle never closes. Afternoon drifts into a sauna. A foreman orders the canvas walls rolled up to vent heat. Fresh air sweeps through, carrying pine resin from nearby forests and a faint tang of fermented bean paste. Voices rise. The kitchen kiln merges into a rhythmic roar. Ladles striking cauldrons, shovels clanging against trough rims, hisses of lime hitting water, laughter when steam fogs someone's eyebrows. Standing in the center, you feel as though you're inside a living lung, inhale rice, exhale fortress. Quirky anecdote time. A traveling physician once advised that inhaling lime dust could clarify the mind, purge melancholic humors. He prescribed construction sites to depressed scholars. The idea never caught mainstream traction, probably because scholars value lungs. Still, a few letters from that era describe intellectuals volunteering at wall projects purely for the so-called therapeutic haze. Historians rediscovered those letters in the 1980s, sparking debates about mental health practices in pre-modern China. Some chalk it up to satire, others insisted hints at proto-occupational therapy. Arguments bubble hotter than your cauldron. A cloud bank swallows the sun, dropping the temperature from sauna to tepid bath. You escort a fresh mortar bucket up a scaffold. The wooden planks creak. Below, the tent looks like a glowing ember. You hand off your bucket. Masons spread the creamy paste with trowels that still smell faintly of garlic from last night's supper. One jokes he seasons his tools so the wall absorbs culinary bravado. His partner claims walls infused with flavor fend off boredom. The trowel slaps, mortar squishes, bricks settle. You watch the rhythm spread, set, tap, slide. It resembles someone icing an impossibly large cake. A thought lands. Which came first, the cook who turned rice into glue or the engineer who thought to eat his building supply? You voice the question. A nearby scholar, clipboard, ink-stained thumbs, smiles. That riddle funds my research grant. Sources conflict. Some credit Tang-era experimenters. Others swear a Song dynasty baker spilled kanji on a temple repair. Then she adds the requisite academic refrain. Historians are still debating. You grin, satisfied box ticked. Late afternoon inverts hues. Sky dims. Mortar knots whiten further against darkening bricks. Kitchen fires stoke again for dinner prep. Smoke snaking upward in lazy corkscrews. You descend scaffold, weary legs tremoring. In the tent, the cook ladles a preview spoonful of evening fare. Porridge blended with millet, hinting of mushrooms. You taste, tongue parsing starch ratios like a sommelier. Balanced, comforting, faint alkaline note from the lime pots boiled nearby. If dinner shows solidarity with masonry, masonry reciprocates by standing firm. Symbiosis never tasted so homey. Somewhere outside, a lute strums. Workers circle a low brazier, trading parceled stories alongside salted peanuts. You settle among them, bowl in lap. Discussion flits from wall gossip to kitchen innovation. Someone claims adding duck egg whites improves mortar smoothness. Another retorts that goose yolks add color but smell awful. Someone else jokes you could cook omelets on sun-heated bricks. Laughter tumbles like loose gravel. But behind each joke sits real tinkering. Frontier life is an unending A/B test. The cook appears, wiping hands on apron. He says the night batch of mortar will steep until moonrise, giving enzymes time to mellow the starch. You picture that slurry dreaming beneath canvas, fermenting the way bedtime stories ferment imagination. He flops onto a crate beside you, passes a jug of warm rice wine. You sip. Sweetness soothes tired gums. He taps your shoulder. My father built temple arches, he says. They used rice glue for murals. Same spirit, different bricks. You nod, suddenly aware that through him, through you, and through every bubbling cauldron, countless trades share a ladle. Your eyelids droop, comforted by wine, by steam, by a faint heartbeat echo from distant kills. You remember the chicken, the hemp fibers, the blood-tinted experiment, the scientist by the trough, the scholar chasing origin myths. A single tent contained more disciplines than a university campus. Tonight you'll dream of cauldrons as galaxies, stars swirling into mortar constellations. The cook stands, stretches, heads back to stir. You watch him silhouette against fire glow. One ladle rises, arcs, falls, and the wall outside grows stronger in that motion. Grain to glue, glue to guard, guard to peace. You close your eyes, breathe rice-scented air, and know you've tasted more than breakfast. You've tasted civilization's binding agent. You drift into the fortress library just as dusk inks the sky, following the scent of lamp oil and damp parchment. Inside, torches flicker like restless fireflies, revealing long desks where inksmiths and quartermasters share elbow space with court alchemists loaned to the project for the advancement of patriotic paced sciences. You claim a stool in the shadows. It's safer to be furniture than focal point when scholars are mid-experiment. On the nearest table squats a bronze censer shaped like a tortoise. Each exhale from its shell releases curls of cedar smoke laced with vinegar. Odor control, someone explains, helpful when your day job involves boiling rice into something that can outlast marriage vows. Two robed researchers argue at a whisper-shout volume about whether amylopectin chains coil like dragon tails or phoenix feathers. One sketches loops and spines across bamboo strips. The other counters by smashing a rice grain between glass slides and declaring, feathers would snap, dragons flex. Mainstream fact drop. The Ming Board of Works really did authorize chemical inquiries into sticky substances suitable for stone, preserving fragments of their correspondence in the Yongle Dadayan Encyclopedia. Those fragments now sit in museums, smelling faintly of charred glue and imperial anxiety. A junior scribe, perhaps 16 and sporting ink freckles, notices you. He offers a scrap already blotched with formulas. The top line reads, 1 part slaked lime, 0.3 part glutinous rice filtrate, add seawater until mixture sings. You raise an eyebrow. Sings? He shrugs, wraps a ceramic spoon against the beaker. A clear hum resonates. If the pitch lands between B-flat and C, the mortar is alchemically balanced, so goes the folklore. Cue quirky detail. Some teams fine-tune the note by tossing in a single brass coin, claiming copper ions mellow the tone and strengthen the set. Whether chemistry or superstition, the coin often vanishes by payday. Mortar thieves have expenses too. Further down the hall, a pair of monks in travel-stained habits decant aged rice glue into porcelain vials. They're compiling a medicinal glossary, convinced minute doses of the stuff can moisten lungs and prevent sudden dizziness. You overhear them murmuring dosage tables, equal parts pharmacology and guesswork. Modern toxicologists still debate if ingesting lime-infused starch would cure anything beyond a desire to brag. Peer review remains pending 6 centuries later. At another bench, a bespectacled accountant coordinates a ledger thicker than a door plank. He's plotting the rice-to-lime ratio against annual humidity charts from 8 frontier posts. According to his tidy columns, every 2% rise in ambient moisture costs the Treasury an extra 12 barrels of grain. You silently salute the empire's first actuarial spreadsheet. Yet across the aisle, a philosophy graduate with calligraphy-perfect sleeves argues numbers are meaningless without spirit resonance between wall and worker. The ensuing tug-of-war, data versus Tao, could fuel symposiums for decades. Indeed, historians still spar over whether Ming technological advances bloomed from empirical measurement or metaphysical conviction. Citations duel like kung fu extras in the footnotes. A hush falls when the senior alchemist, a lean figure wrapped in indigo silk, taps a jade rod against a stone saucer. He drizzles fresh mortar on a test brick, sprinkles powdered deer antler, then breathes on it. Frost-white crystals bloom along the seam. Proof of living calcium, he pronounces. You lean closer. The crystals shimmer, then settle. Science or stagecraft? Hard to tell, but the room collectively exhales awe. You taste chalk on the air and realize even skepticism feels welcome here. Everyone, believer or bean counter, serves the same wall. When the bell for night ration rings, parchment rustles closed. One scribe spills leftover ink into a pot of rice paste, grins at the violet swirl, and predicts tomorrow's joints will set with imperial flair. Another warns purple stains invite disciplinary brushstrokes. Debate pauses only because stomachs demand truce. You slip out, pockets stuffed with borrowed notes that smell of cedar, vinegar, and ambition. You'll return them someday. Outside, the first stars flick on. Somewhere behind you, freshly drafted formulas keep drying beside torch flames, ink tightening like sinew over bone. Whether dragon coils or phoenix feathers, the chains of starch will hold their secrets a bit longer, dangling puzzles for chemistry majors yet unborn. For now, you walk toward the wall's silhouette, carrying a head full of whispered equations and the thrilling suspicion that you've just watched supper evolve into sorcery. Wind flits along the battlement like a mischievous cat, batting at your sleeves while the early crew assembles a makeshift laboratory out of spare scaffolding planks. Someone has chalked a line across the stone, dividing scientific inquiry from snack break. Though you suspect the distinction may blur, today's agenda, according to a clipped announcement nailed beside a torch bracket, reads, Integrity verification of adhesive compound, field methods, tactile subgroup. Translation. Time to discover how hard sticky rice mortar can bite back. The patrol leader is a stout woman named Captain Rowe, famous for splitting helmets with her inspection mallet and for the kind of smile you only notice after she's decided you'll live. She beckons you forward. Lining the parapet at ankle height is a row of protruding mortar beads, excess paste that oozed from yesterday's brickwork. They've cured overnight into ivory nubs, glossy under sunrise like frosting gone rogue. Captain Rowe says the nubs are perfect test pieces. No mason will miss them, and if they fail, the wall still stands. You nod, grateful she didn't invite volunteers to lean their heads into cannon range. She hands you a stub of bamboo carved into a crude chisel. Whittle one off, she instructs. But don't pry, slice. You crouch, blade angled, and push. The nub resists, then shears with a sharp ping, skittering across stone like a startled beetle. The cross-section gleams compact, no bubbles, no chalky voids. Captain Rowe grunts approval before pocketing the fragment. Only then do you realize she stores dozens of similar chips in a linen satchel. Collection or evidence? Perhaps both. With judicial gravity, she selects one chip and offers it to you. Chew, she says. You blink. If your jaw survives, the wall survives. You half laugh, half hope she's joking. But this is the same officer who once used her teeth to strip bark from a bowstring. Summoning bravery, you place the chip between molars and apply tentative pressure. Immediately your brain suggests you're biting a fossilized sugar cube. Pain blooms behind your ear. You release the chip onto your palm, where it sits smug and unbroken. Captain Rowe cackles. Tough as rice candy, see? Mainstream history brims with tales of battlefield improvisation, yet few mention this literal bite test. Field manuals like the Muyu Beiji recommended percussion, but out on lonely ramparts, soldiers refined their own heuristics. One Ming diary describes how a shard unwilling to yield to canine force ranked superior to lime alone. Toothache therefore doubled as quality control, though dentists, wherever they hid, must have reeled. Captain Rowe flips the chip skyward. It rings off her mallet with a tone so clear it could headline a temple bell. Compressive courage, she notes. Then, turning pedagogic, she holds it out on 2 fingers and drops a smooth river stone the size of a baby fist directly onto it. The stone bounces. The mortar stub beneath remains pristine. You stop blinking, impressed. She explains the difference between compressive strength, how much weight before squish, and tensile strength, how much pull before snap. Bricks handle the first. Mortar handles the second, but sticky rice paste hedges both bets by forming nanoscale starch bridges that tie lime crystals into a micro-reinforced net. No textbooks required. Her stone and chip demo lands harder than lectures. A mason clad in sawdust interrupts with a tray of steamed buns, eager to trade snacks for science gossip. He breaks a bun open. Steam coils up, and he nestles 2 mortar chips inside like surprise fillings. A prank? Not exactly. Some garrisons used stone-hard chips as improvised weight stones for dough proofing, trusting they'd stay hot longer than metal. The bun absorbs warmth, the chip cools, and lunch leavens faster. You witness the baker pocketing warm fragments for the next batch, culinary recycling centuries ahead of farm-to-table buzzwords. Historians classify such cross-department hacks under adaptive frontier efficiencies, yet debate whether they emerged from organized doctrine or pure trial-and-error necessity. The argument remains unripe, just like dough before those chips. Rain clouds congregate over the eastern hills, low and bruised, but Captain Rowe waves off concern. Weather equals opportunity. Moisture tests cohesion better than any philosopher. She leads you down a switchback path to a squat outpost where blocks of mortar-bonded brick bake inside a charcoal brazier. Nearby, identical blocks sit submerged in a trough of mountain spring water. Every few hours, guards rotate samples between extremes, thermal cycling to mimic seasons. They call it the seesaw, and the wooden sign above reads, "May your enemies be half as stressed." A clerk nearby notes hairline cracks with the diligence of a jeweler grading diamonds. He shows you parchments. Diagrams track fracture length in crimson ink, cross-referenced by mortar recipe and weather. Mainstream nugget: Ming Defense Bureaus really compiled such data, though surviving archives are spotty. They treated walls like living patients, logging symptoms and prescribing tweaks. More lime in monsoon months, thicker rice filtrate when the wind carried desert grit. Quirky trivia materializes when a young sentinel appears, lugging a sapphire blue ceramic jar. He lifts the lid to reveal mortar chips candy-coated in cane sugar. These Great Wall.Now, he explains, are a prank on new recruits. Pass one around the barracks, watch rookies chip teeth thinking they've scored contraband sweets. Yet rumor says some warriors kept the real sugar-free variety as worry stones, rubbing them smooth during lonely watches. One chip retrieved from a collapsed tower bears thumb grooves half a centimeter deep, evidence of centuries of idle sorrow or patient meditation. Museums display the piece behind glass. Visitors mistake it for river-polished quartz. Outside, thunder rumbles. Captain Rowe's eyes brighten. Perfect timing for her favorite demonstration. She drags a small catapult, basically a bent timber sling, into position. It's ammunition. Cannonballs shaped from pure lime mortar lacking rice additive. She loads one, cranks tension, and lets fly against the wall section mortared with sticky rice goodness. The projectile hits, shatters like brittle chalk, dusting the parapet in pale snow. The embedded bricks shrug. Mortar seems unmarred. "Cheap lime alone," she declares, patting the dusty impact crater. Crumbles under its own bravado. Rice humor keeps its punchline. The pun garners groans. Still, respect radiates for the paste's resilience. You notice a sliver of mortar embedded in your sleeve cuff from the collision. Under close scrutiny, the shard shows translucent granules within a pearly matrix, tiny starch ghosts still haunting their lime hosts. Modern labs describe the structure as a hybrid organic-inorganic composite, analogous to natural shells or bone. Some material scientists argue the Great Wall's mortar qualifies as an early biomimetic technology. Other scholars protest that imitation of nature is retrospective romanticism. Builders sought practicality, not philosophical bio-inspiration. Conference halls echo with that dispute at least twice every decade. Rain finally arrives, fat drops exploding on the sandstone path. Captain Rowe orders the test blocks dragged into open sky. Water sogs your collar, but she insists sticking around 5 minutes. She prizes a fresh chip from a wall seam using her fingernail. Nails like iron, apparently, and hands it over. Now break it. You squeeze. The surface merely beads water, slick yet stubborn. Rainwater sluices off in micro-rivulets, leaving the chip's skeleton dry beneath. More mainstream proof. Rice mortar's hydrophobic protein coat repels moisture, limiting erosion. Ming chemists lacked the term hydrophobic, but they crafted practical waterproofing centuries before naval engineers tamed similar science. Anxious to compare, you scoop a plain lime chunk from the shattered cannonball remains. Under rain, it froths slightly, fizzing as CO2 escapes. Within seconds, the chunk softens, crumbles under thumb pressure. Contrast so stark you feel sudden empathy for walls built elsewhere without kitchen chemistry. Lightning fork in the near distance, followed by thunder that rattles scaffolds. The team hastens to tarp the test blocks. Captain Rowe, however, stays stoic, face gleaming with rain. She's scribbling results on a slate. Hydro shear tolerance, excellent. Taste test still not advised. She winks at you, then marches off to scold a pair of recruits huddling under an upturned bucket instead of recording crack propagation. You take shelter beneath a half-finished watchtower, where an elderly sentry offers a cloth to dry your face. He grins toothlessly and taps his gums. Bit too many candy tests, he jokes. He recounts a legend. An imperial inspector once broke a gold tooth on fresh mortar and later petitioned compensation in silver ingots, claiming the wall ate royalty. Whether story or satire, it illustrates how bite tests traveled from folklore to official records. You scribble the anecdote, mental note to verify later. Historians cite at least 3 petitions referencing dental casualties. But the debate persists on whether they're metaphors for budget gnawing. Rain slows to drizzle. A perfume of soaked pine drifts from uphill forests, mingling with lime tang and steamed bun yeast drifting from field kitchens. You follow Captain Rowe back to the rampart where she unlocks an iron chest. Inside lie polished bronze stamps, each engraved with a stylized tooth. Certification marks, she explains. After today's tests, seems meeting her criteria receive a tooth emblem hammered gently into the still damp surface. Proof to distant auditors that walls bitten but unbeaten. She presses one stamp into a junction. It leaves a tiny smiling molar, whimsical yet official. Somewhere in archival scrolls, auditors tabulate these bite marks per li of wall, correlating to maintenance intervals. Data-driven dentistry. You volunteer to stamp but must prove worthiness first. Captain Rowe tasks you with measuring rebound. She hands you a lacquered mallet, its face inlaid with jade for resonance purity. You strike a mortar seam. The mallet vibrates, producing a note somewhere between dinner gong and courting frog. She nods, acceptable pitch, moderate amplitude. You earn the right to brand a seam. Carefully, you seat the bronze molar and tap. The icon appears crisp, smug. You step back, heart oddly proud, like tagging the universe with an emoji. Sunlight sneaks through retreating clouds, gilding puddles into molten brass. Workers emerge, stretching spines, ready to resume bricklaying. Captain Rowe dismisses you with instructions to hydrate and file a witness report at dusk. On your walk toward barracks, you flip the chipped fragment still in your pocket. Despite gnawing it earlier, the edges remain razor clean. You realize it could double as a whetstone. Indeed, frontier lore tells of swords honed on mortar shards to draw walls resolve into steel. Blacksmiths scoff. Too brittle, they say. Yet some blades bearing Inyang wall motifs tested beyond standard hardness, adding one more layer to the scholarly tug-of-war. Near the stairs, a teenage lookout hawks small trinkets, mini brick souvenirs cast from leftover mortar. He claims chewing them after drying strengthens jaw muscles. You decline, teeth still aching, but buy one to study. The kid wraps it in rice paper printed with jokes. What did the brick say to the mortar? You complete me, but stop clinging. Humor apparently cures monotony as thoroughly as walls cure rice paste. Evening session convenes under lantern glow. Engineers gather to debate results, temperature differentials, moisture ingress, numeric compressive strength scribbled in chalk on planks. A scholar from court sweeps in, robes dotted with rain pearls. She argues crystal orientation matters more than starch bridging. Captain Rowe counters with her bite test statistic. Out of 19 samples, only starch-enhanced ones chipped my bicuspid. The court scholar retorts anecdote is not data. Captain Rowe recommends biting the planks. Meeting threatens to derail until a mediator announces supper. Historians will later label these exchanges tooth wars, citing them as early evidence of participatory peer review among military and civil experts. Whether that elevates or diminishes academic dignity remains, fittingly, debated. With bowls of millet stew circulating, camaraderie returns. You sit beside a young assistant who maps caverns inside Mortar using candlelight and quartz lenses. She discovered pockets where rice granules fossilize intact, glistening like amber. Some think these inclusions help dissipate stress like airbags. Detractors call them structural weakness. Engineers replicate samples in Kill's labs, but consensus skitters. She shrugs, sips stew, and says, either way, they're pretty. Aesthetic truce in the war of hypotheses. Outside, a lavender twilight settles. Bats slip between watchtowers, darting after insects dazzled by torch flame. You wander once more to the bite test field. The broken cannonball fragments have dissolved into chalky puddles under the rain, while sticky rice seems dry to pearlescent threads already tough enough to endure. You press a thumb to one seam. It feels warm, chemical hydration still exothermic. Even in cooling, the wall pulses with quiet power. As you head for bunkhouse, Captain Rowe calls after you, tossing a small linen pouch. Inside lies a single molar stamp chip, your workmanship. Souvenir, she says. Proof you match jaws with history. You grin, rubbing the tiny emblem with your exhausted but triumphant teeth. Storm clouds part one last time, revealing stars. Somewhere beyond tomorrow, another test waits. Rain-soaked, salt-sprayed, maybe frostbitten. For tonight, you settle under rafters, chip safe in pocket, jaw tender but conscience singing. The wall, like rice candy hardened by alchemy, stands watch without sugarcoating. You drift toward dreams where molars ring like bells and bricks applaud in polite, unbreakable silence. The sky behaves today like a flirt with commitment issues. One moment it flares baby blue, next it broods slate gray, thick enough to taste metal in the air. You're halfway up a ladder, juggling a coil of hemp rope for the masons, when the first fat drop plops onto your eyelid. Skeptical, experimental, almost polite. The second drop lands on your neck with decidedly less courtesy, followed by a percussive cascade that sends the battlement scrambling as though the heavens just overturned every washbasin in creation. Instinct yanks you beneath the nearest timber canopy, a skeletal scaffolding wrapped in oilcloth sheets, erected as a rain shadow for mortar curing. The structure groans in the sudden onslaught, beams flexing like an accordion doing warm UPS. You wedge yourself between two stacked bricks, heart drumming along with the downpour staccato. In seconds, the dry valley transforms into an audiobook of whitewater chapters. Roofs drumming, gutters gargling, mud applauding. A veteran mason named Old Two slips under the tarp beside you, water cascading off his conical hat. He offers a grin full of gaps and points outward. We test glue today, he says, voice carrying the mellow thrill of gamblers at the first dice roll. He produces a rolled bamboo screen and pokes its end through the scaffolding gap to form a spout. Immediately a torrent sluices down, diverted away from the fresh wall face. Mainstream insight. Ming engineers designed temporary drip edges exactly like this, makeshift eaves fashioned from bamboo or oiled cloth, ensuring the mortar had at least 24 hours of partial shelter before confronting direct rain. Many official manuals highlight fangyu, rigs as mandatory, Yet archaeological digs still find sections where soldiers clearly winged it with whatever was handy, crafting gutters out of animal hides or even upturned shields. Lightning cracks the sky wide open, revealing the Great Wall curling across ridges like a colossal spine tingling under cold water. Thunder ricochets through the hills, shaking droplets loose from pine canopies so that secondary showers pelt the site. You feel each detonation in your ribs. The wall, built to repel cavalry and siege ladders, now braces against an airborne cavalry of rain spears. Old Two snaps fingers near your ear to regain your focus. He gestures toward the mortar lines exposed beyond the canopy's reach. Water slithers down the bricks in clear rivulets, but when it meets the mortar seems it beads up, refusing entry like bouncers at an exclusive club. You lean closer, rain needling your cheeks, and watch beads collect into silver marbles that roll away, never penetrating. Old Two chuckles. Rice skin, he says. Chemical lecture, courtesy of Grandpa Downpour. Sticky rice mortar forms an amorphous film of amylopectin around lime particles. In combination with carbonated calcium, this film repels water molecules, an effect modern chemists call a low surface energy interface. Contemporary replication studies measure the contact angle of water droplets on Ming mortar at around 90 degrees, impressively hydrophobic by pre-industrial standards. The researchers responsible confess they expected medieval tech to fare worse. Now they list the recipe under unintentional nanotech. A crash of thunder cues quirky fact hour. Old Two lashes his rope coil around a support beam, then shares a frontier myth. Some outposts, worried that rain spirits might grow jealous of the wall's stamina, dripped a single ladle of rice wine into the mortar when storms loomed. Supposedly, the wine acted as a peace offering. Spirits for the spirits, he quips. No archival record confirms imperial approval, but shards from one recently excavated bastion show ethanol residues in mortar pores, igniting debate whether the addition was spiritual, structural, or a covert ration swipe. Historians sip cups of contradictory conclusions to this day. Your gaze tracks the runoff path. Water angles across bricks toward discrete channels. Thin horizontal slots, 2 fingers high, spaced like whisker marks along the wall's outer face. Each slot swallows sheets of rain, funneling it into hidden drains that empty downhill. Mainstream footnote: these scupper holes, pai shui ko, paise ko, were standard after 1470 when catastrophic washouts along the Yongping front exposed the cost of lousy drainage. Post-disaster edicts mandated scuppers every 5 to 8 horizontal bricks, plus gravel spines inside the core to distribute seepage. The engineering mattered. Without them, weight of trapped water could pry bricks apart as frost later expanded. Yet, as you trace the drains with your eyes, a scholar, you'd swear one materializes out of condensation. Pops up, scroll tucked into oilskin. She shouts above the downpour. There's still scholarly dispute about whether those slots existed from the start or if they're retrofits. Her voice is part triumphant, part pleading. You nod. The storm's roar temporarily crowns her queen of parentheses. Indeed, field teams from 2 rival universities argue origins. One campsites early Ming sketches, another points to scupperless rubble layers beneath. Academics, making turbulent weather seem calm by comparison. Wind tests the tarp, ballooning sections inward until wooden pegs creak. You and Old Two knee-jerk hold the canopy poles. Rain drives harder, now slanted by gusts. Drops slap your forearms like thrown pebbles. Old Two hollers that it's time for the bucket ballet, the local nickname for an improvised stress test. Workers haul shallow trays of fresh mortar out from under shelter, position them on slanted planks, and see how much slurry the rain erodes in a set period. Old Two waves you forward. You step into the squall, boots sinking half an inch into instant mud. He hands you a sandglass timer, its belly painted to read 1 incense stick, roughly 15 minutes. At his signal, you flip it. Rain lashes mortar trays. Paste surface dimples, but doesn't wash away, instead forming a thin skin that shrugs off droplets like dragon scales. The sand drains, you note depth lost, negligible. Old Two reveals chalk marks inside each tray showing acceptable tolerance. You're comfortably within the safety band. The wall passes its watery pop quiz. Lightning again, illuminating bandit clouds like X-ray plates. A bolt spears a pine ridge, sparks showering downhill. Moments later, the smell of sizzling resin wafts over. Storm barbecue. You remind yourself to stay inside the scaffold's low profile. Nothing invites lightning quite like a lone human silhouette on a parapet. The wind's angle shifts. Water sheets blow sideways under the canopy, splattering the bricks you'd thought safe. A young recruit panics, trying to drape extra cloth over the breach, but that only creates a pocket where rain pools and punches through with a sloppy gush. Old Two sighs, tugs you aside, and demonstrates the umbrella slide. He props a bamboo rod at 45 degrees inside the canopy, letting water strike its polished surface and skate off into a trench. Makeshift geometry beats brute cloth layering. You file it under Field Hacks Fit for a wilderness TED Talk. Mainstream item 2 arrives wearing a crest of board-meeting excitement. The Ming Army's Engineering Corps issued storm directives specifying angle ranges 35 to 50 degrees for emergency diverters based on observations that water adhesion optimizes at those tilts. Journals from the period treat it as empirical gospel. Nonetheless, later dynastic scholars disputed whether the data accounted for wind shear differences across provinces. Academia, always ready to drizzle on someone's parade. A horn bellows, signaling inspection under rain. High above, Captain Rowe, remember her mallet? Stalks the parapet with 2 aides carrying scrolls already soggy. She's measuring runoff speed by timing leaf boats dropped into scupper mouths. You climb to watch Adventure Loves Company. Each aide flips a leaf boat. Rowe counts heartbeats. If the leaf reemerges at the drain's cliff exit in under 10 beats, drainage passes. Over 10, dig out blockage. You join, eyes tracking a boat down flow channels like a miniature regatta. 1 leaf stalls. Water swirls around clogging sediment. Rowe barks orders. Recruits grab hooked poles, clear gravel, and leaf sprints again. She checks her sandglass, grunts approval, and logs the fix. Thunder softens to distant rumbling. Rain eases into a steady hush. The wall, slick and dark, glows under diffused light like whale skin breaching ocean surface. Brick faces glisten. Mortar seams remain chalk pale where shelter blocked direct soak. Exposed seams darken but hold shape. You run forefinger over one. It leaves a faint chalk smear rather than mush. Adhesion stands tall. Old Two, ever the raconteur, begins a rain story. They say a siege once timed catapults with monsoon, hurling water jars instead of fire pots, hoping soggy bricks crumble. His grin widens. The jars broke. Wall didn't. The anecdote surfaces periodically in border folk songs, but historians scuffle over credibility. Was it propaganda or real tactic? No consensus. Thunder of debate louder than this storm. Quirky sidetrack. Some garrisons brewed fermented soybean wash, painting it over finished walls as an anti-algae glaze. Recipe: beans, rice chaff, water, 2 weeks sun. The stench apparently deterred moss, but also lunch crowds. Archaeological chromatography detected amino acids matching fermented wash on certain segments. Yet other labs found no trace, fueling arguments whether the method was regional, experimental, or tall-tale disguised as olfactory assault. Even the smell has evaporated, leaving only contested footnotes. Rain fatigue settles. Workers slump under eaves, wringing sleeves. Kitchens dispatch steaming buckets. Ginger rice broth spiked with a suspiciously cheery amount of sorghum liquor. 1 ladle warms your palms as you sip. The liquor bites just enough to remind you blood still flows. As you swallow, Old Two flips a mortar chip into the cup. Extra crunch, he jokes. You fish it out, but notice the liquor quickly forms a milky halo where lime reacts. You realize spirits double as impromptu indicator, turning cloudy when exposed to fresh lime. Field chem test to detect uncured sections soaked by rain. Brilliant, accidental or not. Dusk creeps over cloud edges. Rain peters to a mist. You volunteer for weephole patrol, sliding along the wall's flank to ensure drains haven't clogged with storm debris. Water still drips, steady, patient, as though the wall is sweating off an intense workout. Each scupper hums little notes, variations of pitch based on depth behind them. An inspiring accidental symphony. Some soldiers swear they can read weather omens from those tones, predicting tomorrow's skies. Scholars roll eyes, but can't resist correlating pitch with barometric shifts. Study pending. Results inconclusive but melodious. Halfway along, you find a scupper gurgling slower than its siblings. Peering inside with a lantern, you spot culprit. A wad of soaking hemp fibers used earlier in mortar mixes escaped quality control. You hook it out and notice murky water stained faint green. The sheen hints algae upstream. Rain's ceasefire offers chance to scrape biofilm forming along older layers. You flag the area. Tomorrow's duty list will add moss scrub. Slippery bricks breed accidents, and moisture-free cycles wedge gaps. Prevention beats heroic repair. Back near the canopy, Captain Rowe announces rainfall total by tipping a marked cylinder. 2 1/3 bamboo segments. She records it next to seam density and leaf boat times. Data goes to a traveling auditor rumored to grade forts like school children. High marks earn pork rations. Low marks fetch iron gray reprimands. You suspect walls behave better under culinary incentives. Clouds break fully, revealing a bruised purple sunset. Wet bricks catch the light, flickering gold, then cooling to pewter as sun dips. Steam rises subtly from mortar joints still exothermic, like the wall releasing sighs after holding breath through deluge. Workers strip off wet tunics, string them on poles. The wall becomes a makeshift laundry line, colored flags of fatigue. Somewhere a lute picks gentle chords, strings sounding newly scrubbed by the rain. Evening meal transforms rain trauma into gossip stew. Which recruit slipped, which scupper refused, which leaf boat nearly drowned. Laughter clangs bowls. You down a second helping of ginger broth. Heat unknots shoulder muscles. Old 2 clinks cups. Toasts to the rice that outruns rivers. Nearby, a young historian scratches notes. He's tallying how frontier idioms anthropomorphize mortar. He intends a thesis on edible metaphors in military vernacular. His mentor insists the topic is undercooked. Debate promised at next symposium. Night recovers stars rinsed clean. Drips echo rhythmic as temple drums. You and several workers raise lanterns, inspecting earlier test trays. The mortar surfaces have set firm, barely blemished. Captain Rowe approves with a satisfied hum. She declares tomorrow's challenge. Wind-driven sand. You think your teeth still ache from the bite test. Sandstorms sound like free exfoliation. Lantern light patrol winds down. You linger once more beside the parapet, palms flat against bricks still cool and damp. Somewhere within, rice granules continue to stiffen. Lime slow dances with wandering CO2, forming crystalline bonds. The storm tried. The wall shrugged. Scholars will debate every facet, scupper origin, bean wash efficacy, wine indicators, but tonight, results stand audible in the drip-drip cadence of success. You retreat to bunkhouse. Boots squelch, but spirits soar. In your pocket, the bronze molar stamp chip clinks softly against a newly acquired scupper leaf boat you rescued as souvenir. Tiny flood survivor. You tuck both under pillow like talismans. One proof of bite, one proof of flow. Dreams form quickly, damp but luminous, swirling with silver raindrops that turn to rice pearls mid-air. Slotting into mortar seams that glow from within. In the dream, every droplet that hits the wall sings a different note. And you, conductor of storms, wave old 2's bamboo spout like a baton, orchestrating a hydrologic symphony that ends with silence. Strong, settled, safe. Outside, the wall cools, cured just a bit more than yesterday, ready to greet tomorrow's challenges with steady grin. And you, under the thatched roof, grin back. Sleep's umbrella unfurls, and drizzle fades into the hum of distant crickets. The wall dries overnight until its surface feels almost velveteen under your fingertips. But the air still stinks politely of yesterday's thunder tantrum. Dawn arrives in muted peach, no drama, just a color wash across ragged clouds as if the weather regrets acting out. You report to the granary yard where someone, somewhere in the chain of command, decided today was perfect for an imperial audit. They always pick mud season. A porter grumbles as he wrestles a bale of straw off a wagon. The wheels suck at the road with greedy slurps. You sympathize. After the storm, Everything has either softened or swollen, from boots to ledgers. A court magistrate named Prefect Lin presides over the yard like a stern uncle inspecting delinquent nieces. His robes once bragged crimson. Now rain bleach and road dust have negotiated a dull russet truce. He carries 3 items: a bamboo tally board, a cedar abacus, and an attitude that suggests no crate of rice can hide its sins. You are drafted as a runner, again, the invisible glue between cooks, masons, and number crunchers. One of Lin's clerks hands you a slip of silk ribbon labeled Validator. Congratulations, you're now a walking bookmark in today's fiscal novel. Stacks upon stacks of grain bags crowd the yard, sewn from jute and stamped with fort seals. Each bears charcoal numerals for weight, crop type, and district of origin. Some bags bulge obese, others sag as though they've already surrendered a portion. Drivers claim road jolts settle grains. Inspectors counter that night poachers settle deeper. Mainstream historical context steps in here. During the Ming, northern garrisons relied heavily on the liang tax, levied not in silver but in kind, primarily grain and legumes. By shipping cereals directly, the state bypassed volatile bullion markets and ensured armies could be fed or, in our case, walled. Your first task is refreshingly analog. Follow porters up a wooden ramp onto a large platform scale. 2 men shuffle a grain sack forward, place it in the iron cradle, and step back. Prefect Lin's assistant releases a lever. Weights clunk on the opposite arm. Iron ingots in shapes of singing frogs, snarling tigers, bureaucratic whimsy frozen in metal. When equilibrium settles, another assistant slaps a bamboo token onto a pegboard. 1 peg per verified bag. The board bristles like porcupine hide within the hour. Lin operates the abacus as if it wronged him in a past life. Beads snap with such speed you fear sparks. You ferry each stamped sack to its designated mound. Glutinous rice here, millet there, and an unexpected hillock of soybeans reserved for infill mortar experiments. Soybeans, you ask? A grizzled supply officer whispers. High-protein glue. Swells in rain, seals cracks. You log that as quirky fact number 1. Mid-shuffle, a junior clerk produces a copper funnel instrument, the grain probe. He plunges it into a sack, twists, withdraws a core sample into a glass tube. The grains slide through a narrow throat. Any pebble clicks audibly. He dumps the sample into his palm, sniff tests for mold, cracks a few kernels between fingernails for moisture. If they don't snap sharply, suspicion blooms. He adds a drop of lime water. If the cut surfaces cloud, adulterants lurk. Ancient chromatography still good enough for government work. You're waved over to watch an odd ritual. Prefect Lin selects one apparently perfect sack of glutinous rice, slices the top seam with a lacquered knife bearing his personal seal, and plucks 5 grains exactly. He places them on a porcelain shard, dribbles warm water, then kneads them into a mini dough ball. He flips it into the air 1, 2, catching it on the blades flat. If the dough sticks for a heartbeat before sliding off, starch quality meets standard. Too sticky means immature rice. Too dry suggests aging or infestation. Quality passes. He scribbles a stylized character on the sack's tag and stitches it shut with crimson thread. Legend among quartermasters claims Lin's mother invented the test while making tangyuan, history's sweet tooth guiding state security. A group of brick carriers shuffle in, hauling buckets of last night's cured mortar chips. Why mortar at a grain audit? Demonstration time. Lin orders a clerk to weigh chips against silver slices of equal mass, then knocks them together. Silver dense, mortar shrugs. This stone, he pronounces loud enough for distant sparrows, is purchased not with coin but with grain. 1 dan feeds 10 workers who lay 600 bricks. Without rice, these stones are sand. The line draws polite oohs from visiting dignitaries and quiet groans from loaders who fear extra quotas. Mainstream history rides shotgun again. Early Ming emperors, wary of hoarded silver destabilizing currency, revived the grain tax to keep frontier provisioning local. Transporting coin risked theft and fluctuating exchange rates, whereas grain could be stored, eaten, or transmogrified into sticky security blanket. Account books show that in some years 40% of northern grain levy bypassed soup pots and headed straight into lime kilns. You lug another sack, knees protesting. Its tag reads, Early Harvest Foxtail Millet, Datong Prefecture. The bag weighs suspiciously light. A probe confirms emptiness pockets. Some cunning soul patted the sack with straw chaff, hoping it'd pass in muddy weather. Prefect Lin's nostrils flare like a bellows. He marks the bag with black ink shaped like a skull. Not subtle. Porters drag it to a disputed pile for fines, which might include confiscating livestock or, ironically, sending culprits to labor on the wall they shortchanged. Scholars still argue whether such penalties curtailed fraud or merely taught smarter tricks. Evidence exists in clusters. A decade of harsh fines shows a dip in adulteration incidents, then a surge when scammers upgraded techniques. The debate, as always, rages in journals peppered with footnotes longer than the Great Wall itself. A crisp roll of thunder, echo from a distant bank of clouds, draws glances skyward. Rain again? Lin bristles. Wet grain molds fast. He orders canopies erected, and you join a bucket brigade tossing tarps across the mounds. The tarps smell of fish oil, sticky and waterproof. As you pin edges with stone weights, you overhear a merchant pleading with a clerk. Let his convoy unload tomorrow. His oxen have traveled weeks. The clerk points to the sky. The wall waits for neither bandits nor blisters. The merchant mutters about bribery. You note Lin's eagle stare and guess today is not his lucky bribe day. Once tarp stretch taut, Lin convenes a calculation break. Clerks settle on stools, forming a semicircle like students around a stern schoolmaster. He recites figures. Total grain intake versus projected wall section length, mortar consumption rate per cubic zhang, deficit carried over from last quarter. To make numbers edible, he converts them. Every sack equates to so many mortar buckets. Each bucket equals bricks laid from sunrise to midday. Suddenly the bureaucracy breathes in rice, out, rampart. He circles a new column on his board. Millet credit. Some districts can't produce glutinous rice, so they pay tax in millet at a ratio of 3 to 2 by weight. The surplus millet feeds soldiers directly, freeing more rice for mortar. That ratio, by the way, triggers modern economists. Some call it genius resource allocation, others call it exploitation of peasant diets to subsidize infrastructure. Two camps have dueling Excel sheets and zero intention of conceding. Speaking of peasants, a delegation arrives from nearby villages bearing petitions. Their leader, cheeks sun-leathered, bows low and speaks of last month's locust swarm shrinking harvest. Prefect Lin listens, fingers steepled. He will consider reduced levy if they supply labor to sling mortar instead. A barter of sinew for grain. The villagers agree warily. Less tax now, more blisters later. You watch bureaucracy morph into muscle contract before your eyes. Quirky fact break. While Lin drafts the labor assent, an attendant serves tea brewed with roasted rice. The brew tastes like popcorn met caramel in a hot spring. Supposedly, accountants favored this drink while tallying grain because it reminded the spirit that numbers live inside kernels. Whether morale boost or caffeine placebo, you gulp yours gratefully, warmth trickling to toes. Lunch whistle shrills. Workers scatter to mess tents, but Lin's team eats on-site, chewing sesame flatbreads slathered with bean paste while double-checking abacus math. You join, the validator ribbon granting you table access. Conversation drifts. A clerk wonders aloud whether silverization, the rising dominance of coin taxes after mid-Ming, will eventually replace these grain audits. Another replies that sticky rice mortar begs to differ. Until silver can stick bricks, grain stays king. Historians will settle the matter. Someone jests. You nearly choke on bean paste. Future you already knows they won't. Afternoon sun pries through cloud fissures, sizzling moisture off canvas. Steam wavers like spirit threads between grain heaps. Audit resumes with a twist. Prefect Lin opens a cedar casket containing a miniature set of kills, tabletop scale, fueled by spirit lamp flames. He wants to test random rice samples for adhesive vigor. Clerks grind handfuls of rice into powder, mix with lime water, and smear onto matchbox-sized bricks. They place them atop the demo kiln. Within minutes, tiny bricks fuse. Lin's eyes gleam, the wall built in miniature on his desk. powered by grains just audited. Proof in pudding brick form. A young mathematician sidles over, whispering statistics. Last quarter's mortar failure rate correlated with rice shipments arriving overripe by 15 days. Moisture content exceeding 12%. She proposes predictive rationing. Rotate stocks so freshest rice becomes glue, older rice fills bellies. Lynn nods slowly. Innovation enters ledger. Somewhere, an economic historian scribbles footnotes about early just-in-time inventory methods. Others argue it was dumb luck wrapped in bureaucratic bravado. Scholars still debate. Late-day shadows lengthen. Sacks tower like squat monoliths casting long tongues across yard. Tarps off, ventilation on. You help roll barrels of lime from storage. Every grain audited must convert to mortar math before dusk. Workers stand in a line. First passes rice, second passes water, third stirs in lime. Portable cauldrons bloom under smoky braziers. Steam rises. The day's paperwork literally cooks before your eyes. Prefect Lynn supervises the first bucket delivered to the wall, escorted like royalty. He dips a ladle, letting molten porridge fall in ribbons. Bricklayers cheer. Fresh glue means overtime tonight. Lynn signs the docket. One clerk notes the bucket's weight, 82 gene, within optic tolerance. Another records its trajectory, north ramp, tower 14B. The ledger feels alive, veins of ink carrying nutrient paste to skeletal masonry. Sunset finds you kneeling over an exhausted abacus. Assisting clerks compute final tallies. Prefect Lynn has you read numbers aloud. He flicks beads to match, confirming accuracy. At last he leans back, satisfied. Grain intake aligns with projected consumption plus 3% buffer. He stamps the master inventory with vermilion wax. The seal bears a rice sheaf entwined with a brick, iconography that sums the day. Yet tension remains. The skull-marked fraud pile waits sentencing. Lynn convenes a mini-court. Village headmen summoned, porters interrogated, scribes consulted. You witness a tug-of-war between mercy and deterrence. Lynn settles on a compromise. Return adulterated sacks to offenders with doubled quota for next cycle, plus rotation into limester duty, exertion as deterrent. This, he claims, satisfies punitive and productive aims. Some clerks murmur that soft discipline invites repeat offense. Others argue over harshness breeds rebellion. Historians, wait your turn. The debate predates you. Night tiptoes in. Lanterns blossom across the yard, painting amber halos on jute mounds. Audit scrolls roll shut like tired eyelids. Workers haul verified grain into brick warehouses lined with salt-packed trenches, primitive dehumidifiers. You help slide doors shut. Iron bolts clank, echo down corridors scented of starch and mouse droppings. Outside, Prefect Lynn recites a short incantation to the grain spirit, offers a pinch of rice to the wind. Even he, master of numbers, acknowledges the invisible ledger of chance. Before release, Lynn collects validator ribbons. He returns your slip with a courteous nod, then surprises you by gifting a tiny clay token, a stylized grain kernel stamped with his seal. Proof you helped feed a wall, he says. Warm pride glows in your chest. Walking back toward barracks, you pass masons ladling sticky mortar against a moonrise backdrop. The paste glimmers pearly as it oozes into joints, fed by the very sacks weighed hours ago. You connect dots. A rice seedling once tugged from mud hundreds of miles south now anchors stone on a northern ridge, all via the bureaucratic ballet you just danced. Taxation, for all its paper dragons, breathes real mortar into real bricks. Quirky epilogue materializes when Old 2 intercepts you, brandishing a scroll. Inside are official Liang receipts, thin rice paper impregnated with actual rice paste to deter counterfeiters. Greedy officials sometimes steamed and ate them in famine years, erasing the evidence and the calories. Modern archivists lament missing ledgers. Forensic chefs attempt reconstruction. Whether edible receipts saved or doomed careers is, of course, still debated. You climb the parapet for a last look. Grain warehouses nestle like sleepy beasts, bellies stuffed. Beyond them, the dark ribbon of the Grand Canal glimmers faintly. Tomorrow another convoy arrives. Silver may jingle in merchants' dreams, but tonight, grain reigns. Humble, heavy, glorious. You lean over the wall, listening. Below, mortar sets with tiny crackles like cereal kissed by milk. Somewhere Prefect Lynn tallies stars for leisure, beads clicking quieter now. You pocket the clay token, feeling its weight as vow and souvenir. Storms may return, bandits may lurk, scholars will forever bicker over ratios. But the wall grows, rice by rice, sack by sack, ledger line by ledger line. You exhale rice-scented night air. Thankful numbers can taste this good. The moon is a fingernail clipping tonight. Sharp, narrow, brighter than it has any right to be, and you can't shake the feeling it's eavesdropping. Lanterns have been doused along most of the parapet, leaving just you, a single guttering candle in a clay bowl, and a stretch of wall so hush it could pass for a painter's still life. Somewhere below, crickets fiddle a tune too jaunty for midnight security, but the guard beside you keeps time by tapping his spear but against stone. A soft talk that says, "Stay awake, stay alive." It's your turn on watch because the roster loves irony. After a whole day counting grain sacks, the universe assigns you to count silhouettes. Captain Rowe briefed everyone at dusk. Scouts spotted raiders smoke southeast, likely a ragtag band sniffing for gaps. They know we stock mortar richer than an emperor's dessert. Watch for buckets that move themselves. You grinned at the joke then. Less so now, hearing distant hoof rattles under the cricket's concerto. A low fog has crept in from the river gulch, veiling the slope in cauliflower swirls. Perfect cover for anyone curious about sticky rice mortar's resale value. Mainstream backstory helps fill the silence. By the late 1500s, rumors had spread that a single bucket of rice-lime glue could fetch a purse of silver from rival lords or ambitious merchants. Reports reached the capital of counterfeiters whisking away gallons to seal leaking palace tiles, or smugglers peddling it as miracle porcelain repair paste. The Board of Punishments finally codified theft of mortar as misappropriation of strategic ordnance, which ranked 2 steps below treason. That didn't stop anyone, of course. If anything, it raised the street price. You peer over the battlement's ragged edge. The sloped apron falls away into brush and rubble, then levels into moonlit terrace rows where bean plants wave like bashful ghosts. No movement, just the smell of damp soil and half-dried pine. You shift weight to ease a calf muscle starting to whine. The guard beside you mutters, "Think they'll try tonight?" He's young, voice cracking more than the mortar ever will. You consider lying but opt for comfort. If they have brains, they'll wait for thicker fog. He nods, gripping spear tighter. Minutes? Hours? Time puddles. Just as your eyelids lower to half-mast, the crickets go silent. Switched off, as if someone pinched the evening's soundtrack. Spearguard stiffens. You follow his gaze. Shadow ripples through the vinegar fog, oddly vertical shapes weaving uphill where horizontal shrub lines should rule. 2, 3, maybe 4 figures. They move with caution but not enough to fool the moon. The faint clink of metal drifts up. Someone forgot to muffle a hook or buckle. Your spearmate raises a horn. You put a hand on his forearm. Wait. Bandit ears are quick. Trumpeting too early scatters them into shadows, turning chase into whack-a-mole. Best to lure them closer. Let the wall witness their mistake. You slip along the parapet to the nearest beacon brazier, unlit for stealth but packed with kindling. Strike a flint silently, coax a flame the size of a coin, then smother it under a shard of oiled silk. One flash is all the inner guard needs. Within seconds, muffled footfalls skirt behind Merlins as reinforcements slip into position, crossbows raised like curious eyebrows. The moon slides behind a cloud, gifting darkness. Perfect. Your eyes adjust, but the intruder's probably not accustomed to this shade yet. You crouch below the crenel gap, breathing lime-scented night. A hand signal passes down the line on your mark. You count 4 silhouettes now, lugging a narrow barrel slung on a pole. That barrel shape rings alarm bells. Watertight oak, iron-banded, sized for liquids. Not water they could drink from the stream. They want mortar, still warm from evening cauldrons, waiting in staging buckets behind the parapet. A crossbow string whispers. Thunk. One raider yelps as bolt bites ankle. He collapses sideways, barrel tipping. Others abandon stealth, sprinting upslope. You hear Captain Rowe's gravel war cry behind you. Guards leap from shadow, spears outward, nets unfurling. The fight is swift as it is clumsy. Raiders are more supply thieves than swordsmen. Within heartbeats, two are trussed, one limps away into the fog, and a fourth, clever devil, tosses a smoke pellet from his sash before capture, sowing peppery haze that stings eyes and buys escape. Crisis ends, but adrenaline writes long epilogues. A torch flares, faces appear, Rowe unsmiling, Old Two still tugging boots on. Prefect Lin in nightgown but abacus in hand, as if he could subtract bandits by bead logic. The captured barrel lies dented. You roll it upright. Empty save for straw lining. Makes sense. They plan to siphon mortar, not lug heavy liquid uphill. Captain Rowe hauls one captive forward. A wiry fellow with eyebrow scar shaped like an ink comma. She growls. Speak. He spits mud. Defiant. Rowe cocks fist, but Lin intervenes in measured tone. Let us audit our assumptions before shaping confessions. Scholastic even at midnight. An impromptu tribunal unfolds on the wall walk. Lanterns rim a circle around the prisoners. You stand to one side, validate a ribbon, now a makeshift badge. Rowe's soldiers search the thieves, retrieving rope coils, hand augers, miniature ladles. Tools of the mortar milk trade. Quirky artifact emerges. A wax-sealed gourd filled with what looks like duck eggs floating in brine. A guard cracks one open. Inside hides a rolled parchment. Likely the buyer's address, protected from damp by albumin. Ingenious pantry espionage. Historians drool over such spycraft footnotes, though some insist stories of egg scrolls are embellishments. Tonight's evidence weighs in favor of the believers. Interrogation begins, but Prefect Lin favors data over bruises. He asks how the raiders learned the recipe. Scar Eyebrow sneers. Recipe? We just steal the paste. No cook, no math. Just scoop and run. Their buyer, he admits, repairs pagoda roofs where ceramic inlays leak. Sticky rice mortar seals tiles better than pitch, and customers pay handsomely for a leak-proof shrine. You jot that down, mainstream footnote confirmed. The paste's civilian black market appeal indeed included temple restoration. A detail gleaned from a 17th century memorial complaining that sacred architecture was fed with the army's supper. A captured ladle holds traces of last raid, dried mortar flakes. Lin snaps a piece, sniffs, chews to collective winces, then pronounces the batch origin 3 valleys west. Subtle pine ash scent. That kiln uses spruce pine mix. Rowe mutters, accountants. Still, the deduction matters. Identifying supply leak points narrow security holes. At this juncture, mainstream history jogs along. Records mention specialized paste sentries, introduced under Emperor Wanli. Units of 8 rotating through kiln camps, tasked solely with guarding fresh mortar. Salaries exceeded average infantry pay, though morale often dipped. Standing watch over bubbling goo lacked battlefield glamour. Whether their presence cut theft significantly is debated. Some chronicles list a drop in incidents, others note thieves simply shifted to night raids on transport caravans. Historians hold symposium panels titled, "Was the paste patrol worth the porridge?" The argument remains sticky. Rowe decides on a demonstration. She drags a cauldron of still-hot mortar from the staging site, slops a ladle onto a cedar plank, and slaps a stone slab atop. Steam hisses, glue squelches. She orders one thief to try lifting the stone. Predictably, it won't budge. The paste begins to set even in night chill. She addresses the prisoners and troops alike. What you try to steal isn't broth. It's backbone. Then, in softer aside to Lin, but we must still feed them, starving men raid. Lin sighs. Tonight's ledgers grow new columns. A quirky footnote surfaces from Old Two, who pulls a tiny sack from his robe, spilling iridescent grains. Black sticky rice, he winks. Legends claim adding a dash makes mortar darker, disguising it for clandestine repairs. Some gang leaders fancy signature colors, branding via chemistry. Scholars argue black rice mortar ever existed in large quantities. Archaeological digs rarely find pigmented seams. Yet a few remote bastions show charcoal-tinged joints, fueling endless debate. You've now seen evidence in Old Two's pocket, though his motives lean toward mischief rather than conspiracy. The tribunal concludes, thieves will haul water and shovel lime for a month before facing civil court. Their barrel, tools, and egg scroll go into evidence. Rowe orders double sentries till dawn, then waives dismissal. You volunteer for post-action inventory, following Lynn to the mortar cache. Heavy wooden lids lift to reveal pearly stew still steaming, aromatic despite clotted surface film. Lynn inspects quantity, no losses tonight, but security protocol shifts. Smaller batches, staggered cooking, escort details. He drafts an order for cipher seals on buckets. Strings thread through clay tags inscribed with numeric riddles only quartermasters can solve. Rascal leveled up. Hours remain before sunrise, yet adrenaline steals sleep's keys. You find yourself seated beside the very mortar vat, the night's events replaying like shadow puppets against kiln light. You consider the economics. Rice stolen reduces wall by fractions, but multiplied raids could carve bald spots along the rampart. A mainstream anecdote flits in. Coastal towers reportedly collapsed after smuggling rings siphoned mortar over years, replacing it with plain mud to hide theft. The garrison fell for it until a typhoon tested seams. Scholars still brawl over credibility. Some claim structural collapse likely had multiple causes, not just paste pirates. You dab a fingertip into liquid mortar warm, silky. By dawn, it'll stiffen. By tomorrow, become bone. You imagine the thieves' buyer brushing it between roof tiles, praising gods for rainproof sanctum. The moral: one man's security blanket is another's waterproof warranty. Footsteps approach. Captain Rowe again, carrying 2 porcelain cups and a covered jug. She pours lukewarm barley tea sweetened with honey. Night taxes body, she says. You clink cups. Silence feels earned. Then she shares tonight's quirky knowledge drop. Some bandits, short on containers, once stuffed mortar into stale bamboo shoots, capping ends with beeswax. They'd chew the bamboo open days later at destination. The taste? Like licking limestone sugarcane, Rowe reports, grimacing. You both laugh softly. Even theft has a flavor profile. Fog thins. Stars retreat. Roosters rehearse scaleful crowing in distant hamlets. Shift ends. Fresh guards march in, boots crunching frost-kissed grit. You stretch, deliver your incident log to Lynn's assistant. 4 thieves. 1 wounded. 0 material loss. You include speculative note on black sticky rice pigment and bamboo shoot transport. Analyst brain never rests. Before bunkhouse, you pause to pocket a shard from the raider's ladle. Evidence of their last haul's signature kiln ash. You might compare it to samples in the library later. Knowledge arms walls better than spears, Prefect Lynn said once. You find yourself agreeing. Inside barracks, sleep wiggles its fingers. Your eyelids finally consent. As you roll into blanket, mind drifts. The moon returns from cloud exile, sets silver bars across bunk floorboards. You dream thieves bailing mortar into dumplings, guards biting stones, scholars chasing pigment ghosts. The wall towers aloof, amused at human scuffles over its sticky supper. Morning will bring interrogation reports, new security drills, maybe even a reward or reprimand. Historians centuries hence will parse tonight's footnotes, argue whether paste raids ever threatened grand strategy. Some will say yes, citing lost towers. Others will shrug, walls endure, thieves merely snack. The debate, like the rice chains themselves, loops forever, binding past to present. For now, you sink beneath waves of starchy warmth, head tucked between ledger lines and spear shadows, confident the wall, and your own jaw, survived another chapter. Fog still crawls the valley floor when bugles roust you from bunkhouse dreams of moonlit ledgers and runaway dumplings. You shuffle into boots that haven't forgiven last night's chase, tug on a cloak still damp at the hem, and follow breakfast aroma. Rice gruel with pickled mustard to the mess tent. Steam stings eyes open, but chatter inside drapes the air thicker than porridge. Today is ghost shift rotation. The once-a-moon duty few volunteers court. Captain Rowe has posted the list, and yes, your name lounges right at the top like it paid rent. Ghost shift, you learn, means babysitting fresh mortar joints overnight while the rest of the garrison snags uninterrupted sleep. Official purpose: deter saboteurs too timid to face armed sentries, but bold enough to wreck seams when lanterns dim. Unofficial purpose: feed wall legends with new material because nothing fertilizes folklore like midnight boredom. Old 2 pats your shoulder. Keep ears open. Wall likes to tell bedtime stories. His wink jogs your curiosity past sunrise. Dusk returns faster than rumor. Lanterns hang in rhythmic intervals along the parapet, each swaying in wind that smells of pine pitch and ocean memories blown inland. You and 3 other ghosts in training, Spearguard Qua, Apprentice Scholar May, and Carpenter Han, collect gear, oil lanterns, ink tablets, chalk, a copper bell for Real emergencies, and, oddly, a clay whistle shaped like a fish. For morale, explains May, tucking it into her sash. Nobody asks follow-up questions. Fish whistles feel self-explanatory tonight. Your patrol sector spans 2 watchtowers and a half-finished crenel line that still oozes faint mortar warmth like bread fresh from the oven. Moonlight dribbles between scattered clouds, silvering everything except mortar seams, which glow ghostly white. May breaks silence first, voice hushed as slippered feet. Legend says every new batch of sticky paste traps the last breath of someone who let duty slip. She shrugs gently. Folk method to keep workers alert. Qua snorts, but Han nods toward the jagged horizon. I heard they bricked up a cook who served under-seasoned millet. The carpenter's grin fails to reach his cautious eyes. You chalk that one as quirk. Clearly walls can't taste spice, but ghost tales care little for chemistry. You circle your first tower. Wind winds through arrow slits, bending notes like a novice flute player. Qua's spear taps out a 4-beat rhythm. Thump pause thump thump. An old marching cadence. The cadence echoes back an extra beat, though no one taps after him. All 4 of you freeze, ears pricked. Silence. Perhaps a pebble dislodged. You exchange raised brows. Continue. Past midnight, the fog returns. Not thick tonight, but tinged pale green from lantern light. It collects along the base of the wall, hugging seams. May kneels, studying droplets rat-running through mortar grooves. She whispers mainstream context for your edification. Ming Foreman sometimes added boiled willow bark to mortar in damp regions, believing the tannins repelled mold and, by extension, evil spirits believed to travel on mildew. Modern lab tests do show bark compounds slowing algae growth, but historians debate whether mystical motive or empirical observation drove the practice. The argument still flickers through conference halls like fluorescent ghosts, half science, half seance. Muffled thunk. You swivel. Far end of the parapet. A loose brick lies now where empty path stood. Han swears under breath, he'd checked the row at dusk. You inspect. No wind could dislodge a brick mortared yesterday and already half-cured. Qua's knuckles whiten around his spear. Someone prowls. He stalks forward, but May stops him. No footmarks on mortar dust. Indeed, the walkway's flowery film shows only your quartet's prints. The brick didn't slide. It was never set. Likely left behind by distracted masons. Still, adrenaline splices nicely with superstition. You reposition the brick, smear a dab of mortar from reserve bucket kept warm in an ember box. As you smooth it, your fingertips sense subtle ridges, runes, scratches. Under lantern you see faint characters. I am here. They dance inside glaze like shy fish. Jokester mason? You suggest. May frowns. Or signature to anchor a spirit. Scholars have cataloged nearly 200 graffiti bricks along Ming sections. Names, poems, crude doodles, but phrases declaring presence are rare. Some researchers theorize builders wrote them to anchor wandering souls after fatal accidents. Others dismiss parapsychological speculation as romantic nonsense. Debate persists, shocker. The brick note colors the night. Every gust now sounds like a throat clearing. Han hums a carpenter's lullaby to steady nerves. Qua glares holes into darkness. You patrol onward. Second tower looms. Stone belly, wooden cap, windows like sleepless eyes. Inside, mortar storage barrels slouch under tarps. Your lantern halos carve shapes. Rope coils become serpents. Stacked planks morph into crouched figures. May traces wall inscriptions across the staircase. Tally marks in dozens, maybe workers counting loads or days till leave. Some clusters end abruptly. The scholar in her perks. Unfinished counts. Either shift ended or life did. She sketches them in notebook. Wind picks up, slinking through beam gaps, fanning your candle. The air rush whistles, then coalesces into a single human-like sigh. Han drops planks. They clatter thunderously. You all freeze again. Footsteps? No, just wind volleying between tower walls. But your heartbeat sprints, determined to meddle. Quad decides enough is enough. He tugs the fish whistle from May, blasts a note. Quavers, half-shriek, half-giggle. Absurd and childlike. Yet tension loosens. May scolds but smiles. Whistle echoes down the wall, fracturing into distant bird chirrups. If ghosts exist, perhaps they appreciate humor. Mainstream interlude arrives via your memory. The Ming Code of military discipline included clauses against spreading fear rumors. Penalties ranged from flogging to extra quarry duty. Despite that, ghost lore proliferated because morale found it easier to digest dread-spooned in story form. Some officers even weaponized tales. Rumor of a protective soldier spirit discouraged deserter flights. Historians still duel footnotes over whether state tolerated ghost stories as psychological glue or merely failed to stamp them out. Lantern oil dwindles. You swap in a fresh reservoir, but flame guttering draws attention to walls themselves. Mortar seams appear to shimmer, reflecting lamplight like mother of pearl. May claims rice protein crystals refract light differently than lime, creating subtle luminescence. Scientists recently documented photoluminescent calcite in rice mortar under UV. Whether Ming crews noticed is contested, but folklore recorded moon milk seems guiding lost patrols. So you may literally stand on glow-in-the-dark history. Beyond the tower, patrol trail edges a cliff where updrafts hiss from unseen depths. Han warns newbies not to look too long. Some claim the abyss mirrors faces of those entombed in wall foundations. Scholar May corrects. No archaeological dig has yet found full human skeletons inside Ming brickwork. Earlier earthen ramparts sometimes housed grave goods or animal sacrifices, but rumors of mass entombment likely exaggerate isolated accidents. Still, late-night mind insists cliffs show faces anyway. Around third hour, drizzle begins. Mist turned mischievous. Raindrops tick mortar seems like piano scales. The damp sharpens smells. Wet brick, lime, faint vinegar note from last batch's rice fermentation. You pass under an old signal mast. Ropes creak like deliberate floorboards, adding to sonic menagerie. Qua murmurs a soldier's prayer, equal parts caution and apology. A sudden flare flashes from valley. Tiny, fox-orange spark. Another, lantern stolen, or will-o-wisp. Your squad hunkers behind Merlin's. Sparks drift upward, swirl, vanish. May recalls folk belief. Ghost fire flickers above freshly disturbed earth where restless bones resent moonlight. Han scoffs. That's just swamp gas. But voice lacks conviction. Still, mainstream note clarifies. Decaying vegetation emits methane. Friction with quartz sand can ignite under certain humidity, producing corpse-light illusions. Scholars first documented it centuries later. Ming diaries classify such sightings as hungry demon lanterns, prescribing recitation of Lunar Sutra. You recite nothing, but fish whistle again proves handy. Core releases another squeal. Sparks wink out. Coincidence maybe, but morale climbs a rung. Patrol completes second circuit. Mortar appears undisturbed. Relief seeps, yet ghost shift tradition demands one final rite. Listening at the wall. You set lanterns at 12-pace intervals, extinguish them, then press ear against stone. Each of you chooses a different seam. Silence lapse, broken only by wind. Then soft, almost infraudible. You hear, faster than heartbeat, slower than raindrops. A distant, steady tapping. Could be drip echo in scupper channel, could be beetle. Dawn soon will reveal. Qua hears chanting, swears it matches cadence of last night's brick inscription. May records possible acoustic phenomena in notebook. Han claims nothing, only quiet, and seems jealous. You keep your ear pressed, analyzing rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, longer pause, repeat. Morse code centuries early? Brain stirs possibilities until practicality yawns it away. Lanterns relit, you investigate wall exterior via narrow watchsluice. Dawn smudges east with charcoal to peach gradient, enough light to spy valley floor. Rain earlier coaxed flow in a dry creek, trickling under boulders. Drips strike a flat stone, echo upward through drainage shaft 3-2 pause. Nature's percussion, nothing spectral. You report findings. Qua shrugs, half relieved, half disappointed. Ghost shift thrives on ambiguity. Solved mysteries feel like cold tea. Sun lifts, bleaching shadows pale gold. Captain Rowe greets you near barracks, coffee substitute, roasted barley soup in hand. She asks for night summary. May details counts, brick inscription, valley sparks. Rowe nods. Ghosts we can't beat, but walls we can patch. Good work. She assigns masons to secure loose bricks, requests watchtower gap repairs. Breakfast again. Sunlight scoops steam from rice bowls. Old two joins, clutching scroll of folk songs praising spirits who keep Mortar strong. He swears singers attach clay charms to seams. Tiny roof tile figurines shaped like foxes or tigers. Archaeologists occasionally unearth them. Scholars argue over purpose. Protective talismans versus boredom relief. The debate? Ongoing, of course. You hand May the brick with scratches, propose cataloging. She brightens, already outlining essay. Self-reflexive graffiti as spatial claim in Ming frontier architecture. You predict reviewers will battle. Ghost primer or artisan ego? Either boosts citation counts. Later, library duty beckons. You and May compare her graffiti rubbing against glovebox samples. Chemical test kits reveal higher carbon content where strokes lie. Charcoal dust mixed into clay before firing, deliberate permanence. Quirky discovery. One sample includes crushed oyster shell pigment, likely stolen from coastal lime shipments. Suggests Mason had artistic flair and seafood craving. Debate scheduled. Meanwhile, Qua files report with Prefect Lin, who glares at mention of sparks. He demands a swamp gas investigation, purchases lampblack sensors, proves budget lines can haunt accountants even more than spirits. Lin adds column, spectral phenomena mitigation, assigns funds for extra torches, candles cheaper than exorcists. Evening of ghost shifts aftermath. A temple priest visits to bless wall segment. He sprinkles salt water and chants verses older than clay itself. Salt water again. Surprise cameo foreshadowing tomorrow's deep dive on brine chemistry. The priest explains salt purifies and firms resolve. Masons nod, though you suspect they relish free electrolyte rinse. Night returns, but you're off duty, sipping rice wine infused with chrysanthemum under warm eaves. The wall out there breathes quiet, seems subtly shimmering under starlight. Your teeth recall bite test ache. Your ears recall phantom drums. Senses knit a cozy blanket. Ghost legends swirl yet Mortar stands. Evidence of both terror and tenacity. Historians in futures you'll never visit will hyperlink findings, argue long into digital night. Let them. You raise cup. To whispers in the wall. May they keep singing long after we're gone. Somewhere a fish whistle trills one last laugh before sleep locks jaws around camp. Morning closes its fist around a gull's cry, the first you've heard this far inland, and before your brain orders eyelids to cooperate, salt already pinches the air. Last night's priest must have delivered more than chance. His saltwater libation foreshadowed today's march toward the coast. Prefect Lin's new directive squeaks across parchment at roll call. Investigate saline supply chain, verify quality, and report on impact to adhesive integrity. Translation, you're taking a field trip and the wall wants receipts. Noon finds you, apprentice scholar May, and carpenter Han squeezed onto a two-wheeled ox cart rattling down a gravel track. Spearguard Qua rides flank on a shaggy mare. Captain Rowe stays to mind the rampart but lends you her mallet as goodwill charm. The cart bed smells like dried kelp and lime dust. both destined to mingle before day's end. Road dips through terraces where sorghum nods in bronze clusters. Beyond them spreads a shimmer darker than sky. Tidal flats robed in slate mud and opal puddles. You taste brine on wind before seeing any ocean. First contact with saltworks arrives as a plank causeway over mirror ponds braided with low earthen dikes. Hundreds of shallow rectangles, each trap tidewater turning sunlight into crystals one evaporation layer at a time. Workers tread the flats lightly, raking brine, scattering straw to encourage crystallization. A foreman in reed hat greets your party, offering cups of cool, faintly bitter mother liquor. Final concentrate before salt sets. You sip. It coats tongue in metallic kiss, but a sweet afternote surprises, like sugar reneging on its contract. Foreman winks. That back flavor belongs to old rice. We ferment chaff in the pans to jumpstart evaporation. Quirky knowledge unlocked. Rice hull bacteria secrete enzymes that break surface tension, letting brine shed moisture faster. Laboratory microbiologists centuries later will confirm surfactant activity. Historians squabble whether ancient salters understood the chemistry or just enjoyed repurposing farm waste. Cart rolls on to a warehouse smelling of seaweed and dusty ledgers. Bailiffs stack conical salt mounds beneath bamboo blinds. Each heap is laced with alternating layers of charcoal ash. Foreman explains ash absorbs residual moisture and wards off clumping. Also disguises quantity from tax inspectors, he adds, half-smirk. Mainstream detail. Imperial salt monopoly dates back well before the Ming, but coastal forts receive quotas exempt from usual tariffs, recognizing salt's critical role in mortar chemistry. Exemption paperwork, however, travels slower than rumor. Bribery often dissolves in the cracks. Scholars still debate whether coastal exemptions fed more graft than grain levy ever did. May notes a ledger column titled, Sticky Rice Allocation. The entry documents exactly how many stones of salt dissolve into brine shipments bound for frontier walls. Why brine, not dry salt? The foreman gestures toward 2 oxen nosing buckets. Wet weight gives best solubility, saves our boys stirring forever. Indeed, lime slakes faster in salted water. Chloride ions accelerate early carbonation and reduce shrinkage cracks. Modern materials scientists model it with equations. Ming Masons learned empirical shorthand. Salt makes mortar smile sooner. You're ushered into a side shed where wooden vats steep brine with bundles of sun-bleached kelp. Kelp polysaccharides, the foreman claims, soften the water. Scholars centuries later will test samples and find traces of alginate, increasing viscosity and perhaps bonding capacity. Another quirky footnote. Kelp brine mortar exudes faint iodine odor, once mistaken for holy incense in clifftop shrines. Debate persists whether monks praised or cursed the scent. Afternoon sails on a tide of demonstrations. A brine master dunks 2 identical limestone pebbles, one in plain water, one in 6% salt solution. After an hour of gentle boil, the salted pebble registers less mass loss, suggesting chloride barrier protection. Your notebook fills. Han pockets a pebble for future carvings, muttering that salt-cured limestone holds chisel edges without chipping. Artisan myth? Maybe, but he swears by it. Cortez swings rose mallet onto a plank painted with fresh rice lime paste made with sea brine. The strike leaves dent but no delamination. Control sample. Paste mixed in creek water. Flakes. Everyone ooze. Template scenario accomplished. Mainstream evidence plus immediate sensory proof. Scholars' argument cameo. Whether salt's long-term chloride ions risk corrosion of embedded iron clamps. Some labs show tiny rust blooms centuries later. Others blame humidity, not salt. Journals host saltwater slugfests to this day. Evening approaches. Tide returns, licking dike bases. Workers shovel crusted salt into baskets lined with woven rice straw. Again synergy. You volunteer to heft 1 basket. Weight slams shoulders. Crystals clink like broken crockery. Ox cart creaks inbound for return trip, now heavier with white gold and a barrel of mother liquor sealed with beeswax. Foreman gifts each of you a palm-sized salt cake, compressed puck stamped with sea dragon emblem, to ward off travel malaise. Twilight rides home beside cart will squeals. May hums fisher songs. Han whittles kelp pebble into charm. Tests salt cake on horse. Animal licks appreciatively, electing it field electrolyte. You marvel at continuum. Grain farm feeds wall. Salt pond feeds glue. Horse licks defense budget. Just after starlight ignites, the cart pulls near a hamlet straddling estuary mouth. Roofs are thatched with reed and sealed with, you guessed, sticky rice mortar spiked with brine. Village elder welcomes you into communal hall whose ceiling beams dangle bunches of dried shrimp. He pours rice wine distilled with seawater vapor. Toast swells conversation. Elder claims first Great Wall brick recipe drifted here on storm debris centuries before official engineers arrived, courtesy of shipwrecked mason who traded method for a boat ride home. Historians list similar anecdotes along coast. Verifying them is like chasing gulls at low tide, footprints vanish. After supper, Elder escorts your team to a cliff path overlooking phosphorescent waves. He scrapes a torch. Blue sparks dance over surf. Salt binds land to sea, he says, fingers circling horizon. You pocket that line. Scribes crave poetic mortar. Elder gifts last quirky tidbit. Some salt workers carve tiny labyrinth patterns on brick faces set near gates, believing twisted lines confuse evil spirits and, pragmatically, channel runoff. Restoration crews in the 1980s documented such patterns but couldn't agree on purpose, decorative flourish, or hydrodynamic utility. The debate, alive and crystallizing. Night cart ride back to fortress under starfield vast enough to swallow ledgers. Salt cakes thump with each rut. Mother liquor barrel sloshes like a subdued ocean. May dozes against sacks of ash. Han's pebble amulet glints stray moonbeams. Quistil edges the cart, spear upright, silhouette silvered. You absorb brine-laden wind, tasting tomorrow's mortar before it even steams. Fort gates yon open near midnight. Lanterns parse your load. Supply clerks log new columns. Sea salt, verified. Mother liquor, 1 barrel. Kelp extract, experimental. Prefect Lynn wobbles from sleep to witness delivery. Sniffs barrel. Calculates potential mortar yield without touching abacus. Skill flex. He decrees small batch trials at dawn. One wall segment gets brine mix, another stays creek. Data soon will join tooth tests, rain-soak logs, and ghost shift acoustics in Empire's thickening binder. You retire yet can't sleep. Salt crystals crunch between boot treads. You picture granules dissolving into cloudy slake, wrapping amylopectin in ionic hugs. Somewhere chemists of future will diagram that embrace. Tonight you settle for metaphor. The sea lending spine to a mountain's necklace. Scholars, of course, will tangle nets over it. Some praising mineral synergy, others warning chloride creep. But on tomorrow's wall, bricks will lean into briny glue, and what matters is whether they cling through next monsoon. Lantern dims. You finger sea dragon salt cake under pillow, listen as distant kills hiss. A sound not unlike tide withdrawing. In dreams, waves foam mortar white, gulls lay bricks mid-flight, and the wall stretches beyond horizon to loop back, kissing its own tail like a salt serpent biting dawn. The sun tilts toward high noon like a teapot about to pour scalding light over the entire fort, and you, poor thirsty witness to yesterday's coastal escapade, have barely swallowed 2 gulps of beansprout broth before a messenger claps a summons scroll against your forehead. Scholars' lunch debate. Mandatory. The words mandatory and lunch seldom collaborate peacefully, but here they're conjoined twins. You wipe brine dust from your sleeves. Souvenir glitter still sparkles, and follow him to the newly erected adhesive review pavilion. Essentially 4 parasols tied together atop a plank stage, with an improvised banner that reads, "If it sticks, it speaks." Long benches groan beneath an audience of engineers, quartermasters, philosophers, kiln masters, a traveling Confucian ethicist, and, for color, the fort's resident chef wielding a ladle like a scepter. Their bowls steam, their opinions steam hotter. Prefect Lin presides at center, abacus stowed but quills bristling. On 2 display tables rest yesterday's twin test bricks. One bonded with creek water paste, edges already fretting to chalk. The other fused by sea brine mortar, seams shining like polished rice candy. You slide into the observer bench beside apprentice scholar May, who whispers, "Place your bets." Chemistry versus patriotism round 2. Carpenter Han plops down on your other side with a cedar plate of scallion pancakes. Fuel for spectating. Spearguard Quist stands behind, arms folded, spear parked like an exclamation mark. Lin bangs a bamboo fish gong. Lunch debate convened. First voice. Master He, Lime Furnace Chief, cites mainstream data. Salt ions accelerate early carbonation, granting higher 30-day compressive strength by 9% per last decade's frontier trials. He wraps knuckles on brine brick, producing a note clear as temple bronze. Audience nods appreciatively, noodle slurps pause. Enter Madame Zhu, military ethicist, silk sleeves fluttering like agitated doves. She argues wall endurance depends less on molecular bonds than on moral fiber. Rice mortar's true power lies in the sacrifice of grain, food forfeited for defense. That symbolic act galvanizes labor beyond chemistry's reach. She gestures at creek water brick. Even if weaker, it is heir to virtue. Some clap. Others eye the crumbly seam now shedding grit like a nervous actor. Chef Bao, spoon poised, interjects with quirky bombshell. He's been running an unofficial side experiment, adding leftover tofu whey to mortar batches. Whey's calcium and protein, he claims, outperform salt in cold snaps. He tosses a pebble-sized sample on the floor. It bounces rather than shatters. Gasps, applause, and sudden fear that breakfast may soon face requisition. May leans over, narrates under breath. That tofu whey rumor appears once in a 1604 housekeeping manual, never verified. Watch the reaction. Indeed, master, he snorts, brandishes a scroll of kiln logs. Whey-treated mortar turned rancid under humidity, encouraging mold. Chef Bao retorts mold can be pickled like anything else. Audience laughs, then coughs at prospect of fermented wall spores. Prefect Lin restores order with a chalkboard reveal. 2 columns, quantifiable gains versus inspirational gains. Under quantifiable, he lists salt, whey, kelp, hemp fiber, pig's blood, each cross-reference to failure stats. Under inspirational, he writes sacrifice, symbolism, superstition, then shrugs, metrics pending. Laughter tugs the tent ropes. You're called to testify about last night's ghost shift acoustic mystery. Your report of drainage drip percussion gets folded into the inspirational column under soundtrack. Scholars debate whether sonic ambience influences Mason concentration. One cites a song-era poem praising hammer echoes as Lime's heartbeat. Another counters with a medical treatise warning that repetitive knocks cause brain wind. Deadlock. Mid-debate, a courier from Kiln Ridge rushes in, brandishing fresh compressive test tablets. Results. Brine mortar surpasses whey but lags 1% behind a sample fortified with honey. Collective jaw slackens. Honey? Turns out a bored quartermaster added 2 ladles of crystallized honey to petty cash breakfast grout. Sugars caramelized, tightening micropores. Chef Bao cheers. Ethicist Zhu decries wasting sweetness on stone, while soldiers chew millet without syrup. The table erupts. Honey stands versus steel-stomach purists. May scribbles feverishly. Han sketches an exploded diagram of bee-rice lime composite, complete with buzzing arrows. Qua munches pancake stoically. Lin, sensing food fight potential, stages a rapid-fire, yes-no parley. Salt essential? Eyes roar, nays sulk. Honey permissible? Chorus splits, high-pitched and low-pitched Whey salvageable? 3 hands, all chefs. Symbolic grain sacrifice non-negotiable? Thunderous unanimous nod. He sums, Empire funds walls, not weddings. We keep salt, trial honey, shelve whey, honor symbolism. Scroll strokes immortalize the verdict, though you suspect journals will revise it by next moon. Time for palate cleanser. Brother Qian, a monk chemist, offers esoteric angle, cosmic resonance. He claims sticky rice molecules vibrate at frequency aligning with planetary chi, and salt harmonizes the pitch. Demonstration. He strikes brine brick with tuning fork, sets fork near suspended paper strip. Strip flutters. Creek brick fails flutter test. Applause or polite fear? Hard to tell. Academics later will annotate as pseudo-metaphysics overshadowing emergent materials science. Yet Qian's data keeps cropping up yearly in fringe conferences. Chef Bao closes lunch by distributing brine honey rice cakes. Focus group disguised as dessert. Taste: ocean-kissed mochi with caramel notes. Delicious, but you know jaws working hard, texture slightly wall-adjacent. Lin jokes next wall section might be edible in emergencies. Zhu groans. Debate adjourns. Benches creak relief as scholars scatter. May pockets leftover rice cakes for lab chromatography. Han totes honey bricks to chisel hardness sample. Qua shoulders spear, remarking he prefers enemies denting themselves on salt than sticking to honey. You volunteer to accompany kiln crew this afternoon. New recipe needs firing schedule tweaks. On walk back, May ponders. If wall becomes pastry, invaders might eat their way through. You counter. Teeth would surrender first. She giggles, drafts paper title. Dietary deterrence. Gastronomics of fortification. Peer reviewers will either crown her innovator or cancel lunch break. Kiln ridge basks in sun heat hot enough to pre-bake dough bricks. Workers unload salt-infused water, honey jars labeled, "Do not sip," and rice sacks stamped with dragon emblems. Master he calibrates furnace vents. Honey demands lower initial temperature to avoid caramel charring. Smoke spirals smell faintly of fairground stalls. Sweetness interwoven with limestone tang. Quirky scene. A kiln boy licks dripping glaze off shovel edge, declares it better than festival candy but regrets crunchy afterkick. You gather samples for microscopic paper lens exam later. Even at naked eye level, brine honey slurry shows amber sheen distinct from pearl white of classic mortar. Scholars will write odes to its color. Field masons only care whether it slumps. By dusk, first honey salt bricks exit cooling trench. They chime when tapped, though softer pitch than pure brine batch. Strength test scheduled tomorrow. Meanwhile, Chef Bao reappears with an apron full of smashed bricks. He's confiscated rejects for kitchen stock. Waste not, taste lots. He quips, planning to simmer them into syrup for festive sweets. Ethical Zhu nearly faints. Debate cycle ready to reboot. Lanterns flicker awake. You, May, Han, and Qua climb night-cool krenels, each chewing leftover rice cake, contemplating day's intellectual wrestling match. Takeaways. Science inches forward via sweet tooth, salt tax, and philosophical gnashing. Wall stands regardless, but stands better with brine. Whether honey joins toolkit waits on data, and on whether chefs can resist dessert raids. You scribble final note for Prefect Lin. Lunch debate produced actionable ratio. Lime 3. Rice 1. Brine water sufficient. Optional honey less than or equal to 0.2 by weight. Pending durability trials. You add personal footnote. Moral symbolism remains intangible, but undeniably motivational. Below, kills glow like sunset echoes, and somewhere a tuning fork hums planetary chi into salt-slick bricks. Tomorrow could crown honey or exile it to pastry. But tonight the wall digests new flavors of defense, one experimental bite at a time. Snow sneaks in on kitten feet. First a whisper over the pine crowns, then a muttered threat at the horizon, and finally a blunt takeover that leaves the whole fort sugar-dusted before breakfast fires can yawn awake. You step outside into air so sharp it seems carved from glass. Nostrils pinch, eyebrows frostlace. Breath crystallizes mid-sentence like punctuation you never meant to type. Somewhere inside your wool hat, last night's debate over brine honey chemistry feels absurdly tropical. The wall, though, refuses hibernation. Captain Rowe already barks orders from atop the rampart, exhaling steam clouds shaped like angry speech bubbles. Today's target: a half-completed Merlin row scheduled for winter stress tests. Hot mortar must hit freezing bricks, which usually ends with hairline fractures unless you outsmart physics with boiling porridge and something you half remember from a distillery tour. Carpenter Han, wrapped in 3 mismatched scarves, mutters that would swells in cold. Apprentice scholar May records his complaint as anecdotal dimensional variance. Spearguard Qua simply licks a finger, touches stone, hisses at the frostbite flirting with his skin. You join the procession to the winter mash station, a repurposed kiln house now harboring cauldrons so huge they'd make a whale feel underdressed. Fires roar under iron bellies. Rice glop inside royals like Krakatoa pudding. Chef Bao, cheeks already glowing Santa red, stirs with a paddle that might once have been a fairy or, "Keep it angry," he advises. Molten attitude scares cracks away. Steam bursts upward, frosting rafters in ghostly rivulets before melting back onto your neck. Temperature whiplash becomes the theme of the day. Mainstream fact lands with the subtlety of falling timber. Ming frontier manuals prescribed hot-set mortar technique for sub-zero builds. Piping paste spread on preheated bricks hot from kills. The challenge: bricks cool fast in wind, paste chills, water expands, cracks bloom. Solution: heat bricks on-site in braziers, sprint them to position, slap in scalding mortar, cover with felt quilts until initial set. You will soon play courier in that steamy relay. Creaking carts arrive from Kiln Ridge, tarps lifted to reveal bricks stacked like fresh dumplings, still radiating kiln fire nostalgia. Workers in fur-trimmed mitts toss bricks onto sledges. Horse teams snort clouds while dragging loads up slope. Your job: stand halfway, transfer bricks from one sledge to hands of mason teams on scaffolding. You attempt first pass, brick feels like stovetop. Gloves smolder a little. A mason named Rabbit Jean laughs through chattering teeth. If your fingers don't tingle, brick's already too cold. Snow thickens from polite flurry to full opera chorus. Flakes land on brick edges, vanish in sizzles. May notes surface sizzle durations in her book. Data will feed next symposium. She shares quirky small print. Some forts dusted hot bricks with rice husk ash, forming a thermal scarf that sloughed off mid-lay, insulating long enough to avoid shock cracks. Historians can't agree if this practice was widespread or just folk ingenuity. Core samples sometimes reveal ash pockets, but skeptics blame accidental furnace residue. Debate continues, now draped in snowfall. You lug bricks in conveyor rhythm. Grab, sprint, hand over, repeat. Each transfer steals body heat until toes protest. Chef Bao appears with ladles of ginger rice mash, hotter, thinner, spiked with pepper. Sip scorches tongue yet restarts circulation. He claims peppers were smuggled through tribute channels, only recently introduced from across oceans, thus postdating classic recipes but perfect for antifreeze snacks. Academic ears perk up. Did chili pepper influence late Ming fortress diet? Some say yes, others cry anachronism. Footnotes duel like snowballs tipped with flint. Meanwhile, masons slap paste onto brick rows. Steam erupts, momentarily enveloping walls in fog thicker than ghost shift nights. The spectacle earns nickname Dragon's Dumpling Kitchen. Carpenter Han jokes we're building the wall one dim sum at a time. Heat guns included. You watch paste settle into glossy clots, then frost kisses surfaces, turning them pearlescent. Yet seams hold no spiderweb fractures. Success sings in hush of falling snow. Wind then shifts from bothersome to you shall remember me. Gusts dump powder onto your neckline. Bricks start cooling faster than schedule. Captain Rowe orders the quilt chase. Felt blankets soaked in salted rice wine, so they don't freeze stiff, draped over fresh segments. You and Kwa become blanket jockeys, sprinting with steaming cloth across slippery planks. A misstep sends you sliding but Kwa's spear but hooks your belt, rescuing dignity. Felt presses down. Trapped steam puffs out edges like sighs from a tired forge. Mainstream side note, we have written evidence that fort crews stored wool quilts in heated sheds solely for cold weather curing. By contrast, some northern European projects centuries later still lost masonry to freeze cracks. Comparative archaeology delights in these details. Nonetheless, Eurocentric scholars sometimes downplay Ming pragmatism, sparking thread wars in academic journals. Your toes couldn't care less. They're busy thawing under felt fringes. Quirky anecdote bursts from Rabbit Jean. He swears certain crews added a jigger of goat's milk butter to winter mortar, claiming fat slowed water's flight to ice crystals, acting as micro-antifreeze. May raises eyebrow. She knows of one scroll referencing yellow oil additive, possibly butter, possibly beeswax. Modern tests show slight improvement in freeze-thaw cycles with lipids present. but debate remains over feasibility given dairy shortages. The mention of butter has Chef Bao sketching new pastry concepts in steam on his ladle. As bricks ascend, masons carve small snow gauge grooves in outer mortar. Tiny notches calibrated to monitor melt rate at dawn. Deep grooves imply insulation failure, flagged for reheating next day. Scholar May scribbles groove dimensions. She plans a treatise on embedded thermometry in pre-modern masonry. You predict reviewers will request proof grooves weren't decorative. She counters data beats decoration. Time will tell. Afternoon glimmers. Sun peaks, reflecting off snow like a conspiracy of mirrors. On cue, Prefect Lin materializes wearing foxfur collar that would bankrupt a tavern. He tests seams by pressing a copper coin edge into mortar. If imprint remains, paste too soft. Today, only shallow rings appear victory. He nods approval, but scribbles a margin note. Increase brick to mortar temperature delta logs. Accounting never sleeps, only shivers. At break, you join team huddled around brazier. They roast dried persimmons skewered on trowel tips. Sugar caramelizes. Aroma waltzes with pine smoke. Quashare's pocketful of salt cakes as electrolyte nibble. Chef Bao drops crumb of honey salt brick into brazier. It smells, intriguingly, like burnt marshmallow and limestone. Masons boo. Culinary boundaries re-established. Evening nears. Temperature freefalls. Captain Rowe orders the torch wall. Torches wedged between merlins every 10 paces, heat radiating inward. Flame halos turn snowflakes into frantic fireflies. Rowe leads chant. Warm the bones of the wall. Everyone repeats until breath fog forms rising chorus of ghosts. For a moment, unity glows brighter than torchlight. You notice ice crystals creeping across older brick faces further down, where no torch stands. Karpan fetches bucket of brine honey slurry still warm from kiln waste heat. He and you smear a thin coat over ice patches, experiment to test antifreeze claim. Paste sizzles, ice retreats. Good sign? We'll know at dawn. Han leaves cheeky smiley face in slurry. Historians may someday misinterpret as cult symbol. Scholarly debate seeds quietly. Night shift inherits wall swaddled in quilts and torch fragrance. You accompany May to library annex, now heated by diverted kiln flue, to run a quick frost shock test. Small coupons, one with plain lime, one rice, one brine, one honey salt, plunged into snow bath then clinker oven. After 3 cycles, plain lime panel shrivels like bad pastry. Rice holds, brine holds better. Honey salt shows micro blistering. Noted. Chef Bao pokes head, begs for blister sample. He swears blister pattern inspires crispy snack. Denied. Mainstream discourse revisited. Some modern engineers suspect salt-boosted mortar risks internal chloride expansion, compromising longevity. But ancient segments in Liaoning, built with sea salt mortar, still stand robust after 5 centuries of freeze-thaw. Counter-argument references environmental variables. Lower pollution, different salts. The discussion toggles at every materials conference. You sign the day's lab sheet, leave margin scribble, statistical sample. 1 does not equal prophecy. Outside, Captain Rowe patrols quilts, tucking edges like mother hen. She thanks you for extra slurry patch. Wall sleeps, she says, but it snores loud if seams split. Keep her comfy. She offers flask of hawthorn ginger cordial, sweet, tart, fire down throat. Warmth spreads toes upward. Snow slows. Sky clears to star tapestry. Walls radiate faint warmth under quilts, like giant bread loaves proofing overnight. You tap a seam, tone resonates assuredly. You glance valley. Fresh snow prints reveal no intruders tonight. Even thieves respect weather. Or maybe hot mortar scares them. Mason Rabbit sings folk tune of Winter Rice King, mythic hero who carried cauldrons barehanded until palms turned to stone, thereby inventing first trowel. May files it under cultural motif, sacrifice becomes tool. Historians still argue if folk hero referencing an actual engineer or allegory. Either way, tune keeps fingers moving as you coil ropes. Before bunk, you stroll outer parapet. Moonlight pillows on white slopes, wall segments casting charcoal stripes. geometric perfection softened by snow hats on battlements. You crack off tiny icicle forming on torch bracket, lick minerals, taste faint salt, faint smoke, and something sweet. Honey breath from experiment earlier. Future rainfall will wash it away, but tonight flavors swirl. You sense intangible ingredient. Call it resolve, call it absurdity, call it rice spirit. Binding bricks tighter than lime ever could. Back indoors, you tuck salt cake and a small rice husk ash sample into pouch. Souvenirs multiply. Pockets jingle like tool chest. Sleep creeps up, heavy as will quilt. As you fade, you dream of colossal dumplings creeping across snowfield, leaving crenel footprints. They steam, they whisper jokes, they lock together into a wall that circles globe, keeping winter at respectful distance. Tomorrow, quilts will come off, grooves measured, bricks tapped. Maybe honey blisters will fail, maybe succeed. Scholars will throw snowballs of footnotes. But in this moment, in this hush where hot paste still clings to freezing clay, you feel sure of one truth. Warmth is a strategy, not a season. Sticky rice, cooked, salted, spiced, even buttered, carries bonfires inside each starch chain. And the wall, belly full of edible heat, smiles silently into the cold. Daylight pries apart the shutters with a creak that sounds suspiciously like a complaint, and you wake to find yesterday's snow has melted into a thin, crusty glaze. The kind that looks innocent but will trash an ankle if you blink wrong. You shuffle outside and immediately notice a hairline fracture running through the water trough beside the mess tent. Spider-thin, shiny, the work of last night's deep freeze. It is, you suppose, nature's polite memo. Everything cracks eventually. The wall is no exception. Captain Rowe summons you to the south parapet, where a faint zigzag fracture has surfaced along a mortar seam laid half a decade ago. It isn't catastrophic. No bricks yawning open, no goblins poking fingers through. But the line glints in the early sun like a miniature lightning bolt captured in stone. Rowe frowns, runs a leather-clad thumb across it, and says, "Time for a surgical autopsy." You, apprentice scholar May, Carpenter Han, and Spearguard Corps are instantly volunteered as her scrub team. First step is the diagnostic tap dance. Kwa pings bricks with the blunt end of his spear, listening for tonal shifts. Solid bricks ring, cracked substrate thuds. Sure enough, every 10th tap drops half a note lower. Rowe scores those spots with charcoal X's. Mainstream context drops in Ming maintenance protocols scheduled systematic, sounding patrols each spring. Crews log dull tones as potential failure points, sometimes preemptively replacing bricks before visual cracks formed. Modern structural engineers marvel at the acoustic cleverness. A minority insists it was just an excuse for soldiers to practice drum rhythms. Debate rattles on. May crouches, slides a slender copper probe into the hairline, penetrates 2 finger joints deep. She nods gravely and unrolls parchment to diagram the fissure's shape. Carpenter Han retrieves thin wedges and wooden mallets. Today's mission: expose the crack's full length without collateral damage, like a dentist digging out a cavity of silence. You begin lifting bricks, discovering the underside of each bears faint moisture marks in half-moon arcs. Moisture ingress, culprit number 1. Quirky revelation emerges when Han's pry bar nudges a brick loose and you find a tiny bamboo slip wedged behind it. A fortune strip, the kind taverns tuck into dumplings during Lantern Festival. Ink, faded but legible, reads, "May your walls know laughter. Someone's joke, sealed into stone." It feels poetic until May gasps and points to mold blooms waving hello around the slip. Literary cheer meets biological sabotage. Scholars will someday argue whether such good luck charms weakened walls. Half will say symbolism trumps damage. Half will brand them microbial Trojan horses. While extraction continues, Prefect Lin appears, of course, ledger in hand and abacus beads twitching like restless squirrels. He lists possible causes in columns: thermal stress, foundation settling, seismic tremor, workmanship lapse, poetic vandalism, even cosmic wrath, that last one penned by Brother Chien, the chi-tuning monk, who tags along clutching a bronze tuning fork. Lin assigns you to investigative interviews. The wall is gossiping, and you're to write the transcript. Interview 1. Old 2, the veteran mason. insists fluctuations in lime purity cause microvoids that later join forces into cracks. He claims the batch 5 years back arrived with too much unburnt limestone grit, a result of shortage-driven rush firing. He punctuates with an anecdote about a kiln supervisor demoted after forgetting to rotate flame channels. Historians still quarrel over kiln rotation schedules. Some say weekly, others daily. You jot both. Interview 2. Chef Bao blames an ancient enemy, vinegar thieves. He explains that townsfolk sometimes pilfered rice vinegar from garrisons, then diluted stolen stock with water to hide missing volume. Weak acid later spilled into mortar buckets, altering pH, slowing carbonation, and leaving pockets of weakness. His evidence? A faint sour scent he swears he smells when tapping the cracked seam. May's nose remains unconvinced, but she takes a vial sample for lab titration. Debate marinade begins. Interview 3. Brother Chen connects fracture geometry to planetary misalignment. He notes the crack angles precisely 23 degrees northeast, mirroring the tilt of earthly heart meridian, meaning the wall resisted celestial chi until it split. Roe rolls eyes but notes angle anyway. Pragmatic crews don't ignore free compasses. By noon, a section 3 bricks high and 10 wide lies disassembled, exposing mortar bed veined with grayish streaks of efflorescence, salts migrating to surface and crystallizing. May identifies them as vanished honey sugars meeting winter dehydration. Remember yesterday's honey trial? Seems earlier honey experiments years back formed sugary salt combos that later bled crystals, widening pores. A smoking gun. Lynn scribbles sugary efflorescence risk, in bright vermilion ink, underlines thrice. Mainstream evidence slides in. Archaeological surveys on certain 16th century wall segments reveal climbs of salt blossom, sometimes attributed to brackish groundwater wicking. Some chemists propose honey residues could amplify the effect. Others argue honey volume in recipes was negligible. The discussion ossifies into camps named sweet rot and dry sugar myth. You now possess field data that may tip scales. Quirky aside, while you photograph, well, sketch, the crystals, Quinn nudges you and whispers that local children pick efflorescence shards, dip them in tea, and pretend it's rock candy. He grins toothily. Free snacks from angry masonry. Roe overhears, bans the practice instantly, citing tooth decay and national security, a combination historians will later call the confection embargo of 1587. Repair strategy forms. Replace compromised bricks. Inject fresh sticky rice slurry fortified with high-grade lime. No honey, minimal salt, butter optional but unlikely. Carpenter Han crafts custom wedges that hold new bricks tight while paste cures. Chef Bao lobbies to drizzle minute vinegar after set to deter future microbial squatters. Debate erupts but Lin kicks decision to tomorrow's mini-symposium. Afternoon sun casts raking light, highlighting microfractures you missed earlier. You mark them in lampblack for tomorrow's follow-up. Brother Chen tries the tuning fork test again. Post-cleaning brick rings brighter. He smirks. Celestial harmony restored. Roe grunts. Harmony's fine. Give me hardness. As day wanes, you and May retreat to library annex with crystal samples. Using glass scrap and candlelight, she observes crystal geometry, needle clusters, sugar-salt hybrids. She proposes publishing note. First in situ observation of honey-induced halite crystal matrix in Ming mortar. You foresee reviewers demanding more replicates. Evening meal features thick millet stew. Chef Bao salts carefully, eyes flicking to Lin's notes. No one tastes honey tonight. Conversation hovers on crack lessons. Sometimes innovation invites fissures. Sometimes good luck charms corrode. Sometimes cracks merely mark growing pains. May quotes a philosopher. A wall without flaws is either unfinished or untested. Qua asks if that applies to people. Han shrugs, passes him a jug of warm rice wine to consider. Captain Rowe orders night patrol to watch fresh repair. Quilt bundles ready, torches lined up, but weather eases. Stars blink, frost holds. You volunteer for first shift, ears tuned for sinister pops of freezing paste. Instead, you hear occasional drip from scupper, a lullaby of gradual thaw. You touch new mortar, Still warm, still flexible. You exhale steamy approval. Under moonlight, crack-free seam gleams like healed scar. You recall the bamboo fortune slip. May your walls know laughter. Maybe the charm came true, cracking to demand attention before failure escalated. Scholars will parse symbolism. You just feel gratitude that walls, like people, speak their pain in lines you can mend. Midnight nears. You scribe final log. Crack origin, multifactor. Thermal shock, honey efflorescence, moisture wicking. Repair, standard rice lime paste. Hot set, honey band pending. Future action, monitor efflorescence. Review vinegar override debate. As you sign, ink freezes momentarily, then thaws, paper itself living the thermal cycle story. You lean back against uncracked Merlin, gaze at starlit ridge. The wall, stitched anew with threads of hot rice courage, stretches restful. Somewhere below, snowmelt trickles through soil, carrying old salts away. Somewhere above, Brother Chien's tuning fork snores on his lap. Cracks, you decide, aren't failures but invitations. To listen, to learn, to laugh at fortune slips, and to lay smarter bricks tomorrow. Morning breaks with a heavy, soft sigh. The wall, as if indulging in the warmth of its recent repairs, settles quietly under the sun's slow march eastward. The sky, a blend of pale yellow and silver, casts a glow that stretches across the frozen earth like a cautious hand reaching out to touch the wall's jagged crown. You step out of your bunk, feeling the shift in the air. The crispness of dawn holding the promise of another day spent beside this massive, growing thing. The recent fracture, now sealed and carefully watched over, is only one of many marks that the wall wears like a soldier's battle scars. Captain Rowe's voice carries through the morning haze, calling for the day's assembly. You, Mei, Han, Kwa, and the rest of the team are summoned to the parade ground, where once again the day's mission is plotted, argued over, and finalized with the precision of a well-rehearsed play. This is no ordinary work. It is a choreographed dance of survival, brick by brick, mortar by mortar, day by day. As you move toward the briefing area, your thoughts linger on the coming winter, on how the wall is a living thing. Always shifting, always adjusting, always learning how to withstand what it faces. Not just the weather or the wear and tear of time, but the sheer weight of the thousands of hands that have touched it, the thousands of decisions made, each tiny crack and seem a testament to human ingenuity and failure, both. Today, that ingenuity will face a new test, the north wind. You'll have noticed, Rowe begins, her voice cutting through the crowd with the sharpness of an experienced commander, that the crack we repaired yesterday has already shown signs of stress. The morning wind cuts through the seams like a knife. If the mortar doesn't hold through today's storm, we'll be back at square one, and this wall will have failed us again. May, always the first to speak up, raises a hand. If the issue is thermal shock, we could mitigate it by perhaps increasing the insulation between layers or incorporating a bit more hemp fiber into the mix. It worked on the section last spring near the eastern gate. Rowe glances over at Lin, who's been scribbling on his notepad for the last few minutes. He nods and sets down his quill. A solid suggestion, May. Hemp fibers could improve flexibility in cold weather, but they won't prevent the expansion and contraction that comes from the wind. We need to look at how the wall breathes with the seasons. It's not enough to rely on simple additives. You listen carefully as Lin's eyes scan the horizon, calculating, always calculating. We've never built for this kind of wind, he says quietly, almost to himself. Not this late in the year. The traditional mortar mix works when the temperatures stay steady. When they dip like this, with the wind cutting through it, things change. We need to reinforce with a structural mix that can handle compression better, something that adjusts on its own over time. The conversation sways between ideas, ranging from modifying the mortar further to increasing structural reinforcements, like adding more stone to certain sections. Some suggest bringing in more salt to help with curing in the cold. Others argue for experimenting with a more robust rice paste mix. Your mind ticks through options, comparing the mortar experiments from earlier this week with the weather conditions you're now facing. You realize that the solution might not be in one fix, but in a series of small adjustments, like stitching together a worn quilt. Ro interrupts your thoughts. It's settled then. We'll start by testing a combination of the techniques we've discussed. We will experiment on the sections most exposed to the wind first, and then move on from there. Han, get your teams together. You'll be overseeing the first round of tests. May, stay with me and Lin. We need to start documenting this carefully. You nod and begin to make your way toward the work area, where the crack you helped repair yesterday now seems almost forgotten by comparison to the sheer volume of tasks ahead. The air is already growing colder, and the wind starts to pick up, carrying with it the promise of a storm that's barely making itself known. The first rounds of testing are straightforward. You and haul bricks, while Han sets up the infrastructure for the test. May holds a clipboard, watching the process with sharp eyes, marking down measurements, temperatures, and any changes in the mortar's consistency. The first round doesn't hold up well. The mortar begins to crack around the edges within minutes, as though mocking your effort. It's a painful reminder that the wall, no matter how grand or majestic, is only as strong as the sum of its parts. It needs to change, adapt, evolve. Later, as the wind picks up and flurries of snow begin to dance through the air, you find yourself beside May, who is staring intently at the mortar she's just mixed, feeling the shift in the air as much as you do. This wall, May murmurs, is more than just a structure. It's a story written in stone, lime, and rice. It remembers everything we've put into it, every mistake, every victory. And it's teaching us how to do better next time. You nod, your breath clouding in front of you. And it's teaching us how to survive the winds, isn't it? Yes, she says softly. But we have to listen to it or we'll end up missing the story, just like we almost missed the crack yesterday. It's all connected, each layer of mortar, each grain of rice, each gust of wind. If we ignore the wall's needs, if we don't adapt, we'll be left with nothing but fractures. You take a long look at the wall, watching the first sections that were patched today. The wind howls, but it feels like a warning, a challenge from the earth itself to see if this wall can withstand everything that nature, time, and humanity throw at it. Maybe it's not about fixing the cracks, you muse, but learning how to live with them. May smiles, her eyes twinkling behind the snowflakes settling on her cheeks. Exactly. The wall teaches you that perfection is a myth. You just have to make sure the cracks don't tear you apart. The day wears on, filled with the rhythms of trial and error. The wall teaches, as it always has, in small ways, through shifts in pressure, subtle changes in how mortar adheres, the quiet hum of bricks settling into place. The wind picks up again, stronger this time, but the wall stands firm. The new mixture holds. As the sun dips low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the parapets, you step back, weary but satisfied. The wall once again has survived. Tomorrow the mortar will cure, the wind will blow, and the snow will melt. And the wall, like all good stories, will keep adding new chapters, one brick at a time. The morning after the storm is quiet, almost too quiet. You wake early, stretching into the chill of the new day, the air still thick with the promise of frost. You don't need to check the wall just yet. You know the temperature dropped further overnight, and with it, another test awaits. The mortar you laid yesterday is still fresh, unsealed. The wind is calm, for now, but the next wave could hit at any moment. You grab your coat and step into the crisp morning, your breath visible in the air, a reminder that nature doesn't care about your plans. As you make your way to the south parapet, the scene is already busy with workers testing yesterday's mortar. Han, Kwa, and May are already setting up their gear, eyes on the new batch, but it's clear that everyone is nervous. No one knows whether the changes will hold. The crack is still visible from where you stand, though it looks more like a scar now, something the wall will wear with pride if the repairs hold. Morning. Ro's voice cuts through the stillness, sharp and steady. She's already there, standing tall as always, eyes scanning the wall as if she could read it from the distance. Ready for round 2? You nod, adjusting your gloves against the cold. Let's see if it sticks. The words feel too heavy in your mouth, but you know what you mean. It's not just about the mortar, it's about what the mortar represents. It's about the choices, the work, and the risk. It's about whether the wall can hold up against what's coming next. All right, let's get to it. Row commands and the team begins to move. The first test is simple. Tap, inspect, measure. The mortar, now hardened and cured under blankets of snow, has held together in the gentle calm of the morning. No cracks have formed yet, but it's too soon to tell if it's truly effective. The wind is expected to pick up later, and that will be the real test. You and May climb up to a higher section, where the wind has more bite. The gusts are colder here, biting at exposed skin and making the mortar feel like it's holding its breath, waiting to see if the storm will be its undoing. You press your ear against the mortar, feeling the stone beneath it, hearing the subtle, shifting tones beneath the surface. It's alive, you think, alive in a way that only centuries of construction and the knowledge of those who have built before you can make it feel. It's speaking not with words, but in the way it resists the pressure, in the way it holds together, stubborn and silent. By midday, the first signs appear. The wind picks up, swirling in from the northern ridges, and with it comes a slight shifting in the mortar. You hear the faintest crack, barely audible, but you know it's there. Ro is already watching, her sharp eyes catching the same sound. May, standing beside you, scribbles in her notebook, tracking the changes. It's minor, May says quietly, but it's there. The mortar is flexing, but it's not failing. It's holding. That's the first sign of success. It's not perfect, but it's not falling apart. The mortar, mixed with the adjustments made for the wind and the cold, is doing what it's supposed to do. It's adapting, responding. You make a mental note to add this to the report. Resilient under first heavy wind gust. Continue monitoring flexion and response to temperature variance. As the afternoon draws on, the wind grows harsher, the storm pushing harder, but the wall stands, unshaken. It's a quiet victory, not the loud clash of triumph, but the slow, steady growth of something that knows it must endure. Ro calls for a break, and the team gathers in the mess hall, the cold pressing against the walls, but the warmth inside a small comfort. Not perfect, but a step forward. Ro says as she pours tea into a cracked clay cup. Keep at it. Adjustments worked for now, but the storm's far from done. You sit back, feeling the weight of the morning's work pressing into your bones, but the satisfaction of watching the mortar stand firm stays with you. This is what you came here for, to see the wall hold, not just against invaders, but against time, against nature, against everything that threatens to tear it apart. Night falls quickly now, the wind still howling outside, but inside the barracks, there's a strange peace. You run your hand over the rough stone in your quarters, feeling the grain beneath your fingers. It's the same wall, but it's not the same as it was when you first arrived. It has grown, it has learned, and so have you. The process is never perfect, never easy, but you've made progress. The mortar you worked with yesterday is still here, holding the stone together. And that, you think, is enough for now. The storm continues to howl through the night, but the wall stands. You rest your head on your pillow, not bothering to check the cracks in the mortar again. The wall will tell you what it needs tomorrow. And as sleep pulls you under, you find yourself imagining the wall as something more than just stone and mortar. Something alive, something that listens, something that speaks in cracks and shifts. You fall asleep with the thought that maybe, just maybe, it doesn't matter if it's perfect. What matters is that it endures.